Pleasure, I think, for the fourth year running to open this International Women's Day debate. International Women's Day provides us with the perfect opportunity to come together to celebrate the remarkable achievements of women and to commemorate the great progress that we've made and continue to make. Around the world today, women and men will be marking the celebratory occasion in various ways. There will be events in local communities, discussions in places of work, arts performances in schools, and debates across countries, much like the one that's taking place today in your Lordship's House. And it is a privilege to be just one part of these celebrations. We've come a long way in a short space of time, and we should celebrate all that we've accomplished. Last year, in particular, was an outstanding year for women's progress, and I wanted to highlight some of the incredible achievements that we have made. We allocated £5 million of funding to mark the centenary of voting rights for women. This money funded over 300 projects that raised awareness of this crucial milestone and encouraged more women, in particular, to participate in democracy, building a diverse political system that reflects the nation it serves. For example, my lords, the Courage Cause event that built on Astor to Stand, which featured workshops hosted by parliamentary experts and discussions with serving MPs, provided help and guidance for 350 women to get on that crucial first rung of the political ladder. And I hope to see some of the women who participated entering Parliament as sitting MPs one day. There was the Centenary Cities Fund, which was allocated to 7 towns and cities to celebrate their suffrage history. These cities hosted a range of exciting projects to celebrate as well as remember those individuals who helped make votes for women a reality. Let me give you a taste of what was on offer. In Manchester, we had cycle rides through history, touching on the lives of some women who made important contributions to the cause of women's suffrage. In Nottingham, we had banner-making workshops, encouraging people of all ages to celebrate the anniversary of the Representation of the People Act of 1918. In Bristol, we had Black Women's 100 event, which unearthed stories about the incredible women of colour who fought for the right to vote in the early 20th century. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I know in Leeds, Bolton, Leicester and London there were hundreds, if not thousands, of other events which took place as part of the celebrations. Of course, we had the statue of Millicent Fawcett, the first statue of a woman to stand in Parliament Square, and the statue of Emmeline Pankhurst in my home city of Manchester. It was a huge privilege to be part of the unveiling, and what made it so special and so significant for me was the fact that my daughter was watching from the building opposite where she works. As an employer, I know she wished to work for them due to their proven track record on gender equality, which makes me incredibly proud of her. And I'm certain that all these statues will serve as a reminder to all of us of the courage of our foremothers and inspire future generations of women and girls to come. In November, we hosted the Women MPs of the World. We had over 100 female MPs from across the world participating. And we witnessed history as the House of Commons chamber, for the first time ever, was filled solely with women. It was a Herculean task to pull it off. I must pay tribute to the Right Honourable Member for Camberwell and Peckham in the House of Commons. It started as her idea and evolved into a collaborative effort of 2 political parties, 3 government departments and 3 arm's-length bodies to fly in around 100 female MPs from around the world to participate in receptions, plenary sessions and workshops here in Westminster. It demonstrated the power that this House has when we all pull together. The work of the previous year has left a lasting legacy that will undoubtedly provide greater opportunities and influence for women within our society. But, my lords, the fight for equality did not stop last year. We need to carry forward the momentum from the centenary year to make sure that our progress towards gender equality does not stall. We know that inequality still persists across the world. Globally, 1 in 3 girls or women has been beaten or sexually abused in her lifetime. Every 2 minutes, a woman dies in pregnancy or childbirth. Over 200 million women living in 30 countries have undergone female genital mutilation. In the UK, we know that women are much more likely to have time out for caring, with lasting impacts on pay and progression. Nearly 90% of those not working due to caring for home and family are women. And the gender pay gap still stands at 17.9%. Until we have true economic, social and gender parity, we will never be equal. This year's theme for International Women's Day is Balance for Better. And with that in mind, I want to look to the future. I want to talk about what the government is doing to ensure that we have better balance in our society and how we are delivering for women and girls. Yesterday, the government published the refreshed Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, which sets out how we're going further and faster in our response to these terrible crimes. Much has changed in the 3 years since the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls strategy was published. We have a better understanding of the effects on victims and seen increased public awareness through the Me Too and Time's Up campaigns, which is welcome. The refreshed strategy will implement a review of the criminal justice response to rape and serious sexual violence, which is crucial to ensuring that victims and survivors see the justice they so desperately need. I welcome increased reporting of these crimes, which shows that more victims have the confidence to come forward, but we must ensure that the police, Crown Prosecution Service and response through the courts is as robust and effective as it can be. We will also be developing guidance for providers and commissioners on best practice for supporting LGBT victims of VAUG, as well as reviewing our national statement of expectation to ensure that VAUG services deliver locally and are as effective as they can be. Sadly, violence is something that touches many of our lives. We must do all we can across government, working with statutory agencies and specialist third sector organisations to support victims and bring perpetrators to justice. Later this spring, we will publish our gender equality and economic empowerment strategy, setting out our plans to address the persistent gender-based barriers that women and men face across the country at every stage of their lives. The strategy will focus on 4 key themes: entry and progression in the workplace, especially for those far from the labour market or in low-paid, low-skilled work; optimal choice over parental leave and childcare; economic well-being in later life; and attitudes and social norms about roles that men and women play. My right honourable friend, the Minister for Women and Equalities, shared her emerging thinking about the strategy with a wide range of stakeholders on Monday of this week. She set out that a key theme will be tackling the financial fragility that impacts on some vulnerable women and girls. And as a compelling example of this, she announced that she will be convening an expert cross-sectoral task force to find sustainable ways to address period poverty in the UK, along with UK aid support for projects tackling period poverty and stigma globally. The gender pay gap reporting deadline for year 2 is less than a month away. Our world-leading legislation meant that for the first time last year, over 10,000 employers reported their gender pay gap, providing an unprecedented level of transparency, driving board-level discussions and pushing employers to take real action to close the gap. In fact, Bloomberg liked our model so much, they have integrated our key measures into their Gender Equality Index for investors. My Lord's reporting is just the start. It is crucial that employers use their gender pay gap data to identify the barriers to women's recruitment and progression and take action to break down these barriers. We had 100% compliance last year, and we expect the same this year. We saw the gender pay gap fall to its lowest level ever of 17.9%, but it will take until 2052 at this rate to eradicate it. Yeah, we won't be here anymore. To eradicate it completely in the UK and much longer globally. We have to do better, my lords. We've committed £5 million in funding to help people return to work after time out for caring and find jobs that use their valuable skills and experience. In addition to the initial £5 million fund we established for returners in 2017, a further £500,000 worth of funding has been provided to support those without additional barriers to participating in the labour market. This may include people with complex needs or multiple barriers such as substance abuse or homelessness. We've gone even further, and an additional £100,000 worth of funding has been announced to support those people with little or no work history. We have also launched best practice guidance and a toolkit to help employers run effective returner programmes, and we would urge them to make the most of these publicly available resources. Gender equality, my lords, is a global issue. I recently attended a gathering in Spain of ministers from across Europe. While we are leaving the European Union, we are clear that we will continue to work with partners in Europe and across the world to ensure that women and girls have the same rights and opportunities as their male counterparts. My lords, I'll conclude by saying that I'm proud again to participate in today's debate with so many staunch advocates of gender equality. And I'm proud to be part of this government, and it's an honour to be part of the work that we're doing and will continue to do to fight for gender equality across the UK and across the world. We are making great progress, and it's only right that we celebrate how far we've come. Now all I ask of you is to keep working together, especially in these challenging times, to think how we can balance for better, and how we can ensure that gender equality becomes a reality sooner rather than later. I beg to move.
The question is that this motion be agreed to.
My Lords and my Baronesses, I thank the Noble Baroness and the Minister for bringing this debate before us today. And it is, like the Minister feels, it is a privilege to be speaking in this debate today, albeit late on a Thursday afternoon as last business. And perhaps next year we can have a much better time to have our debate. My Lords, this year's theme is Balance for Better. And as we consider the UK's role in advancing gender equality globally, we must face up to the challenges that there remain to tip the scales currently weighed towards men. So whether it's intimidation in public life, gender-based violence or equal pay, only these can be tackled. Can a truly better balance be found? My Lords, increasing the number of women in public life is about improving decisions and outcomes, and more importantly, having our elected institutions looking like the people they represent. Now, according to the United Nations, only 24% of all national parliamentarians are women. And in the UK, for example, the House of Commons has 32% women, House of Lords 26%, the Welsh Assembly 47%, the Scottish Parliament 35%, and Northern Ireland 32%. Now, I'm proud to say the Welsh Assembly is the best in the United Kingdom. And I have to say, if we can do it in Wales, we can do it anywhere. So I think this is a challenge for the rest of the country. So, my Lords, the voice of women in the UK was lost when the coalition government of 2010 disbanded the Women's National Commission. And although the government at that time said it would be taken in-house, with the government's Equality Office having the responsibility, I have to say nothing is now heard from them. And I believe they can't possibly be doing the work the WNC was carrying out. So perhaps the Minister can tell the House what is happening in this field. The WNC was an asset in the United Kingdom, comprising of over 650 women's organisations and providing different governments over a 40-year period with a great link to women in the United Kingdom. So if this government is not prepared to re-establish a new WNC, I can give a guarantee that the next Labour government will do so. We will provide a strong independent voice for women's organisations in the United Kingdom, and it will be women's voice to government on a whole range of issues. My lords, women in politics face an extraordinary amount of abuse on and offline, partly because they speak up, but also simply because they are women. Online abuse can affect women's human rights to safety and freedom of expression. Social media companies must do more to protect female users. But this abuse undoubtedly comes from sexism that still exists in our society and can manifest in even more violent ways. Sadly, many women in public life have been victims of this violence. And I would like to pay tribute to my former colleague, Jo Cox, who was killed just because she was serving the people of her constituencies. And we think of her today. So, my lords, as we call for more women to enter public life, we must always remember those who have paid the ultimate price. My lords, when talking about the UK role in advancing gender equality globally, we cannot ignore the biggest domestic issue of the day. And it's difficult to talk about the idea of a global Britain while we leave our most important international institution, the European Union. The EU has been credited with advancing women's rights and gender equality. And according to the Equality and Human Rights Commission, Brexit could see equality protections fall behind the EU, as well as existing ones being removed. And the government continues to leave no deal on the table, which would not only be catastrophic for the economy, but also for equality. The government's own impact assessment reveals a no deal would leave the UK economy up to 9% smaller, and the Women's Budget Group have said that such a downturn would disproportionately impact on women, but there would be many other more consequences because of this. A no-deal Brexit would leave hard-earned women's rights at the whim of future governments without the protection of an international court. And a hard border on Ireland would mean women travelling to access safe abortions facing increased checks, costs and delays. So will the Minister explain how women will be protected in the event of an economic downturn resulting from a no-deal Brexit? Another dividing line between the sexes remains gender economic inequality. Now, Eurostat ranks the UK as having the 5th worst gender pay gap in the EU, and it is 2.77% higher than the OECD average. The Office of National Statistics found that gender pay gap amongst all UK employees is 18%, and more must be done to close this gap, and the Minister did speak on this in her opening remarks. And I don't think we can wait all this time till, I think it was 2050, when we won't be around to see it, I don't think, will we? So let's hope we can get a move on with that. So, my lords, gender-based violence remains a major public health issue and is a violation of women's human rights. Women fleeing from conflict are left in extremely vulnerable positions. The development charity International Rescue Committee states, and I quote, "Girls living in crisis-affected communities are at an increased risk of gender-based violence, including sexual violence and exploitation, intimate partner violence and early and forced marriages. The UK must lead the global effort to protect and empower these women, but we must make sure this protection extends to women at home. It's a well-known fact that on average 2 women are killed every week in England and Wales by a partner or ex-partner. Unfortunately, the government's programme on austerity and cuts to funding of women's refuges have left many women with no safe place to go. Now, Women's Aid have found that 1 in 6 referrals to a refuge were declined owing to a lack of space or capacity to support the survivor. Well, I met a remarkable woman recently, Charlotte Neer, who is the CEO of a women's refuge. She is a survivor of domestic abuse and now runs a women's refuge. She took part in a Channel 4 documentary on women's refuges she runs, and it was called safe at last inside a woman's refuge, and it's the first time such a film has been made. Charlotte allowed Channel 4 access to the refuge, mainly to highlight the lack of funding, but also to show what work is being carried out. And the staff were absolutely amazing and so dedicated, but they are very worried that they may have to close owing to a lack of funding. I would recommend noble lords watching this film, and if possible, to be shown in Parliament, and I would be really happy to facilitate that. I would ask the Minister if she would meet with Charlotte to hear direct from her the difficulties women refugees are undergoing now. So, my lords, what is needed is for the government to ensure local government have enough funds to support women's refuge so that no woman is turned away. When a woman is turned away and must return to an abusive relationship, she is risking her life. I look forward to the Domestic Abuse Bill coming to your Lordship's House, and I welcome the Government establishing a joint committee to consider the bill. And when the bill is passed, the Government and the Minister has reassured me that it would ratify the Istanbul Convention. And if this is the case, they will need to provide all the resources necessary to ensure the work can be carried out effectively. So can the Minister, I would ask the Minister if she can explain how the role of the Domestic Abuse Commissioner will operate in practice and the Government's plans to guarantee the Commissioner's independence. So, my lords, a better balance of women's voices, ideas, rights, protection and a fairer distribution of wealth as per equal pay can only make the world a better place for women and girls. Gender inequality continues to hold women and girls back. We cannot allow women to be shortchanged in the workplace, and we cannot allow women to lose their jobs in a no-deal Brexit. We cannot allow violence to be used as a weapon against women and girls. And when we consider the UK's role in advancing gender equality globally, we should not settle for anything less than the UK becoming a leader in equality. And, my lords, I can give an assurance that will be the aim of a Labour government, and I look forward to the day when there is a balance for better in the lives of girls and women globally. Thank you.
Yeah.
My Lords, I'd like to thank the noble lady, the Minister, for introducing this very important debate and pay tribute to the work that the government has made in advancing women's equality and rights globally, building on successive governments, on the incredible work that's taken place around the world, and also to it's a pleasure to follow the noble lady Baroness Gale and pay tribute to all the work that she's done as well. I come to this as somebody that's been involved in gender equality, working with women, particularly women from ethnic minority communities for many decades. I founded the first domestic violence women's project for Turkish, Kurdish and Middle Eastern women some 25 years ago, and I'm very proud that that's still going from strength to strength, and many of the women that were initially came there for support have gone on to become quite empowered women and have gone on to become much more in control of their lives and help other women. So that's been something that's followed down the track that's been really, really successful. But I wanted to turn really to what we're doing. My contribution today was really, I think, on the public discourse of black and minority ethnic women, and particularly Muslim women. And I just wanted to touch on this really because I've become increasingly concerned that the narrative and stereotypes persist that Muslim women are either victims, they're subjugated, oppressed, controlled by their families, unable to speak English, yet at the same time blamed for bringing up children who become radicalised. Now, I may not be very popular in my contribution, but I do think it needs to be said because I've become increasingly uncomfortable, and I've been at various events this week with other women from Muslim backgrounds, younger women, very empowered women, educated women, who are actually rather fed up with this narrative that persists. For example, most recently questions in your Lordship's House, whenever there's questions that refer to Muslim women, it's inevitably about forced marriage or FGM or child brides. It's never anything very positive. I recognise these things exist, but that isn't the only dimension that we should be looking at women from these backgrounds. And I think we are missing the opportunity to support and empower Muslim women if we simply stereotype them and put them in a box that they are somehow oppressed women. I come from a Muslim background. My mother was a Muslim woman. I can tell you, nobody ever controlled my mother. She barely took suggestions, let alone instructions. So, you know, that's the line of women that I come from, and I know many, many women like that from other communities. So I just wanted to touch on some facts. So British Muslim women, for example, they face various layers of discrimination. They're women, they're ethnic minorities, they're Muslim, as I've mentioned. And a study in 2015 found that 35% of Muslim women are employed. That's compared to 69% of all women. But Muslim women, we're being told, aren't allowed to go and work. But they do want to work. Some 16% of Muslim women are always looking for work. I think that number's probably gone up, compared with 5% of the rest of the female population. Looking at the figures as well, Muslim girls and women are doing extremely well in exams, in schools, and going on into further education, and really pushing at the door, wanting to get into professions, into more professional jobs that they have been traditionally excluded from. They want to be part and integrate a part of the British society. So let's accept that that's what we all are. I'm one of those, that we are part of British society. There is no other, and they need the support. They need our support as well in order to reach their empowerment. And there are many factors which directly impact on Muslim women as well. As I mentioned, the reality is 46% of the Muslim population live in the topmost deprived areas of the country. I mean, that has an impact. We must recognise that. There's strong evidence that Muslim men and women are being held back in the workplace by Islamophobia, racism, discrimination, and they're less likely to be in full-time work, not for want of trying. So I was looking at some research from the government's Social Mobility Commission in the recent years, and Professor Jacqueline Stevenson of Sheffield Hallam University said in her research, which led research, that Muslims are being excluded, discriminated against or failed at all stages of their transition from education to employment. So we take these factors. These have profound implications for social mobility. Academics are citing similar problems. Students facing stereotypes, low expectations from teachers, few positive role models in the classroom. Young Muslims routinely fear becoming targets of bullying and harassment and feel forced to work, as one put it, 10 times as hard as their white counterparts to get on and be accepted. And I'm going to come to headscarves, because I think this is such a big issue. There is an obsession with what women wear. I mean, women wearing headscarves particularly face discrimination. I don't know why what a woman wears should be of such consequence, particularly to men, but apparently it is. It's a very controversial and emotive subject. And it's a very sad fact. It's very sad that the previous Foreign Secretary, for example, likened Muslim women in niqabs to letterboxes and bank robbers, which led to an increase in abuse and attack on women. It's unfortunate. So what we need are political and civic leaders to act responsibly in the public discourse. We need to stop this narrative that Muslim women are all victims who need saving or figures of fun. Let's not tolerate this casual racism. Yeah. We need more positive role models. And it's a very positive thing. I think the noble lady, the minister, mentioned that we have now 8 Muslim women MPs, a record number in the other place, which is great. We need more. We need more here, actually, as well. We need more BME teachers. We need more role models in terms of recognising the talents of, children. Schools and pupils are losing out on the talents and skills of the BME teachers and are unable to advance their careers. But women and girls, as I said, are doing better. So, my lords, if we value the contribution of all women in our society and we're serious about BME women and men feeling valued and integrating in our society, we must create a level playing field and dispel the outdated narrative but women from different communities are all oppressed and simply need saving. And I just close on this really. BME women are now, as I said, leading in media, arts, business, sports. I meet so many talented young women who've come here from around the country who are doing so well. Let's celebrate this and ensure that these women's voices are heard, they're celebrated, they're valued and encouraged. The balance for better, which is the theme of International Women's Day, can only be achieved with efforts of men and women in positions of influence to give all women a strong voice in our society.
Yeah.
With some caution, conscious of the considerable risks as a man speaking on International Women's Day. But dwelling in ambiguity is perhaps the lot of those occupying these benches. I'm acutely aware, for instance, that as a Lord Spiritual speaking on defence matters, I interest myself in swords and in ploughshares. It was sporting those two hats that I recently watched the RAF's current recruitment advertisement. Its images depict the reality of women in a service in which every role is open to them. We see women readying themselves for combat as engineers, as pilots. The voice-over, alas, articulates a more familiar reality in which women are told, predominantly by men, that their concerns centre around lip gloss, skincare and the contents of their wardrobe. The disparity between voice and image strikingly expresses the distance travelled, but also the many miles we have yet to transverse. I sensed some of this while listening to this week's questions and debates in your Lordship's House. We've reflected this week on FGM, on consent, pay, abuse, on how much has been done, on how much we want to do, of how much there is to do. I cannot avoid reflecting that the same is true of the Church. Next Tuesday sees the 25th anniversary of the ordination of women to the priesthood in the Church of England. The fruits of the hundreds of women who followed their call are all around us, including in this house, with the bishops of Gloucester, Newcastle and London sitting on these benches, shortly to be joined by the Bishop of Derby. In the College of Bishops, women represented around half of appointments made between 2014 and 2018. And amongst the clergy, I was particularly struck by the comments from a first-year ordinand, Hannah Barr, at a recent anniversary service at Lambeth Palace. She said that in preparing for priestly ministry, she stood on the shoulders of giants, inspired by the first great generations of women in ordained ministry. They've made the church better, they've made society better. They are pioneers. And we can look to the promise of years to come. At Ripon College, Cuddesdon, where I serve as Chair of Governors, half the academic staff are women. On Cuddesdon's different pathways to ordination, we see a clear majority of women. The same is true of the subset of that group, the ordinands on my own diocese training programme, the Portsmouth Pathway, and that pattern is replicated more widely. And yet, my lords, and yet, your lordships might have noticed that I refrain from describing women in ordained ministry as women priests, nor would I describe female colleagues on these benches as women bishops. That risks suggesting that there are priests and bishops, and then there are women priests and women bishops. My lords, no. There are priests and there are bishops, all of whom have been obedient to their call. Similarly, on the numbers, a majority in training doesn't translate into equality. We are decades from that. Even at that distant point, much will depend on who sits where. Our culture, in the church and in society, has some distance to travel before we can confidently say we are inclusive. As one ordinand, Joe Wynne Smith, put it, equality only happens when men start doing what women do, not when women do what men do. My lords, we have much about which we must be humble, perhaps even penitent. I wonder, therefore, if this is a moment for celebration. It's rather more an occasion to mark, to take note. So, my lords, I end with this thought. Christians, or more exactly theologians, are fond of the word eschatology. I risk the ire of those same theologians for grossly simplifying a complex notion. But we might say that eschatology is interested in progress towards the end time and anticipates that time, the time when all things are made new. I think that's a helpful concept for today's debate. There's progress, yes, but we've much, much more progress to make before we reach one particular eschatological moment. That is our arrival in another country, a country in which we find it no longer necessary to mark International Women's Day or the anniversary of the ordination of women, because in that other country, equality is so embedded in our lives, our practices, our very beliefs, that what is right is what is normal, unexceptional, natural. We're still, my lords, far from that New Jerusalem.
My lords, it's clear that many women around the world do still lack equal rights and empowerment opportunities. They face discrimination and violence. As parliamentarians, what can we do individually to change that? Well, one way is to be an active member of the Interparliamentary Union. All of us here today are automatically members of that by virtue of being parliamentarians. The IPU feels strongly about achieving gender equality, recognising the link between democracy and equal participation of men and women in parliaments and civil society. Travelling overseas with the British group of the IPU, taking part here in inward programmes for overseas parliamentarians, gives us all the opportunity to work for gender equality. We can demonstrate the advantages of the progress already made here in the UK and support the work of DFID in developing countries. And we have made good progress here in the UK, but we have much more to learn. We can do that from others in other countries to make gender equality a reality worldwide. During the February recess, I took part in the IPU visit to Ethiopia together with the Noble Baroness Lady Barker and Pauline Latham MP. Our objective was to strengthen the relationship between the UK and Ethiopia at a time of political change and reform. In his first year of office, the new Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has appointed women to 50% of the cabinet positions, appointed the first ever female president, appointed a woman as Speaker of the House of Federation, and put a woman at the head of the Supreme Court. Despite these changes and Abiy's determination to carry out widespread reforms rapidly, many worry that they won't sufficiently address the deep-seated bias against women in the country, which is near the bottom of the UN rankings on gender equality in sub-Saharan Africa. DFID's annual budget in Ethiopia is £300 million. That's their largest in Africa, their second largest worldwide. The Ethiopian government has used international aid and its own resources to lift millions out of poverty over the past decade. But it remains a country with enormous development needs. It still has high rates of chronic childhood malnutrition and maternal mortality. That, combined with female genital mutilation and early marriage, leads to acute gender inequalities. I was therefore keen to learn about DFID's work there on education and health. Access to both transforms the lives of girls and women. We visited a UK aid-supported elementary school and health centre built on the same site in Ada district. One of the barriers to girls' attendance at school has been a lack of access to water and toilet facilities. DFID's water and sanitation strategy is vital. DFID also gives financial and technical support to the health centre to procure essential maternal and child health medicines, including vaccines and family planning aids. The centre is staffed by a clinical officer, nurses, midwives, auxiliary health workers, and there's an ambulance to bring mothers to the health centre to give birth. Against this background of genuine improvement in reducing maternal and child mortality, much more needs to be done. At our DFID pre-brief in Addis, Pauline Natham asked the officials what work was currently being done by DFID to eradicate FGM there. She visited Ethiopia a few years ago with the Common Select Committee and saw DFID's work on FGM projects, and it was having some success. But the surprising answer to her question was that DFID officials weren't aware of any UK development aid assisted projects on FGM in Ethiopia now. I hope that's not the case. So can my noble friend the Minister outline the current work of DFID or DFID-funded projects to eradicate FGM in Ethiopia? And if that work really has stopped, why is that, given that FGM is so prevalent still? DFID's programme in Ethiopia remains vital to the country's development and vital for improving the prospects for women and girls. We can do so much to assist progress there towards gender equality, but at the same time, we can learn how we can make even better progress ourselves and practice what we preach.
My Lords, this time last year we held two debates. In addition to our regular International Women's Day, the other one in February was around the role of women in public life, recognising not only the centenary of the Representation of People Act, but also 60 years since women were made life peers. As the Noble Lady made in her introductory remarks, last year was a big year for those of us involved with, concerned about, and encouraging and supporting more women into public life. Looking back, it feels a bit like 2 steps forward and 1 step back, or perhaps even 1 step forward and 2 steps back. There were many highlights of the year. We marched, the usual International Women's Day march, but a very special memory were the processions in June, where tens of thousands of women and girls wearing violet, green and white scarves came together in Belfast, Cardiff, Edinburgh and London as part of a celebratory mass participation artwork. It was a beautiful day and a very joyous event. The unveiling of the Millicent Fawcett statue in Parliament Square was another highlight. I was lucky enough to be in a front row seat, and with our second woman Prime Minister unveiling the statue, we all felt uplifted and hopeful about the future. The summer was full of Pankhurst parties and equalities, rather too many cups of tea and cakes, to be honest. And November saw a great Ask Her to Stand event with around 250 MPs inviting women from their constituencies to an inspiring day at Westminster. A huge effort organised by 50/50 Parliament and supported by the Fawcett Society, of which I am now pleased to be a trustee. As the Noble Lady Baroness Williams said, Parliament hosted an International Women MPs of the World Conference, where for the first time ever, elected women from over 100 countries across the world were welcomed to sit on our green benches by senior women MPs from all sides of the House, sharing both best practice and challenges. The Centenary Action Group, who have organised a coalition of over 40 women's groups, have become a powerful lobby organisation. And 50/50 Parliament, the only organisation committed to the simple aim of a balanced Parliament, run by the indefatigable Frances Scott, has been a game changer for those of us from all parties campaigning to get more women into Parliament. She runs it on a shoestring, but with incredible energy. I do urge my noble friend to look inside the pockets of the GEO to see whether some funding might be made possible for 50/50, which would help to increase their capacity and outreach work. So all this activity in a full year of asking women to stand has culminated in a substantial increase in the number of women starting their journeys towards public life. Probably for all the political parties, but certainly for us in the Conservative Party, where I understand between 400 and 500 additional women are now in the pipeline. In August, our Conservative Party chairman, Brandon Lewis, announced his ambition to increase the number of women on the candidates list from around 30% to 50%. He admitted that this wouldn't be easy, but confirmed that he personally would work tirelessly to make this happen. I look forward to working with him to achieve this increase. So, a year of activity and optimism. But yet, is it 2 steps forward or 1 step forward and 2 back? The vile and violent assault on women parliamentarians, especially in another place, has increased exponentially. This puts women off even starting their journey. I recently heard of one elected woman in public life in a senior role who is being harassed by a group of men who resent her position and are doing what they can to drive her out. Apparently she's a difficult woman who needs taking down a peg or 2. Really? Nothing about doing the job competently or well, just what appears to be good, old-fashioned misogyny. Both Labour and the Conservative Party have lost women MPs to the independent group, taking us in the Conservative Party back down to below 20% of MPs. Or put it another way, 4 out of 5 Conservative MPs are still men. Disappointing. But there are events and organisations to celebrate this year. The Conservative Women's Organisation, the oldest political women's organisation in the world, formerly chaired by my noble friends Baroness Seckham, Ainley, Byford and Hodgson. Inspirational role models, all of them, and it starts its centenary celebrations at this weekend's conference. We look forward to the unveiling of Nancy Astor's statue in Plymouth to commemorate the centenary of her election as the first woman MP and a Conservative to boot. And the 90th anniversary of the first general election with full voting equality will fall in May, and the credit for that, as I'm sure noble lords will be aware, lies with Stanley Baldwin. In 1927 he said, "Democracy is incomplete and lopsided until it is representative of the whole people, and the responsibility rests alike on men and women." And in 1928 he extended that franchise to all women over 21, overcoming strong opposition in his cabinet, led by Mr. Churchill, who thought that flappers would find socialism irresistible. Mrs. Pankhurst, a friend of Baldwin, who was adopted as official Conservative candidate for Whitechapel in 1926, sadly died before the 1929 election, at which she would have proudly displayed the Tory colours. So finally, my lords, a word of advice for those considering starting their journey into this building. If you don't buy a ticket, you won't win the lottery. Get going. Who knows where it may take you?
My Lords, I thank the noble lady, the Minister, for initiating this debate. One of the key ingredients for advancing gender equality is leadership, and I believe the noble lady has shown that in spades. When I first started on the road to trying to advance gender equality over 50 years ago, I had hoped we might have gone further down the road than we have. We seem to have won the right to work twice as hard as men, all the while multitasking, the right to be knackered. I want to talk about 2 points. Firstly, that macroeconomics do not take women's contribution sufficiently into account, and secondly, give examples of how inspiring women keep me going. Almost all macroeconomics are male-based. Women's unpaid care work is crucial and often neglected consideration in the design of economic policies and reforms. In one report of a conference run by the Women's Budget Group, it was said unpaid work unjustly absorbs economic shocks and often compensates for austerity measures. In other words, it's women who pick up the pieces during periods of austerity, and the government must accept some responsibility for this. And the disproportionate burden of unpaid work on women and girls creates a barrier to access to decent jobs and promotion prospects. And there may be more women in employment than ever before, but many have been displaced from secure public sector jobs into temporary work or the informal economy or underemployment. And this increases their financial insecurity and widens both the wage gap and gender gap. And importantly, many have fewer opportunities to participate in decisions that directly or indirectly affect their living conditions and those of their families and communities. All economic policy changes should be subject to a gender equality impact assessment, and the failure to take account of the full range of contributions made by women mean that the impact of austerity measures are not taken fully into account. And local government is a case in point. And central government funding fell by nearly 50% between 2010 and 2018. And this has had a devastating effect on local services, mainly used by women: adult social care, domestic violence refuges, childcare. It's also led to more job losses for women in public services. And in the last year, there have been 2 reports from UN experts highlighting the devastating impact austerity is having on women's rights. If you combine the austerity measures with the obscene gap between rich and poor, the results are disillusionment with traditional social democratic parties and fertile ground for extremism or populism or both. Turning now to how women in leadership can be a vital element in encouraging and motivating others, and I only have time to mention 3. Watching Julia Gillard when she was Prime Minister of Australia, in total control at the dispatch box in Canberra, and yet finding time to see me immediately after question time, that was inspiring. She's now leading global education projects and inspiring many more. Sue Patel from Astor, the Shop Workers Union, who chaired this year's TUC Women's Conference, and who said, "We are underrepresented in decision-making structures and overrepresented in poverty statistics." Or Gina Martin, who told the Sunday Mirror, "I'm just an ordinary working-class girl from the north, and if I can change the law, anyone can." She, as many of you will know, was at a festival when someone photographed under her skirt. She reported it to the police, who told her it was not a crime. And when she posted a picture of the 2 perpetrators on Facebook, she was told to take it down because it was harassment. She felt so violated, she started an online petition to make an upskirting, as it is called, illegal. And she said, I quote, 18 months later, I watched the law being changed at the House of Lords, tears streaming down my face. People who take violating pictures up skirts can now be sent to prison for up to 2 years. That's action speaking louder than words, my lords. So let's renew ourselves for another year of fighting for gender equality.
Yeah. Each year in this debate, many noble lords speak of their experiences and share uplifting stories, but also speak of traumatic situations and practices they have witnessed around the world. And very troubling some of those events are. So I thought that this year I would concentrate on the good fortune that we have as women living at this time in this country, and be thankful for the changes that have been taken and are taking place. When I was first married and became involved in politics in the 1950s, life was very different from today. Many married women did not take paid employment, various reasons. Some institutions would not employ married women. Some women felt that as their income was added to their husband's, there was no point. He paid tax on it, and, as you can imagine, difficulties often arose. Women were unable to hold a building society account or buy any item on hire purchase without their husband signing the document. I believe that one of the most important emancipations for women has been the implementation in 1990 of the Independent Taxation of Husband and Wife Act, changing a woman from being a chattel to, and in the process, often saving many a woman from being chained to an abusive husband. Women began to take a greater interest and role in public life, and over the years flexed their muscles to improve the life of women in the workplace. The gender gap, despite legislation, has still not been eliminated, and as we heard from the Minister, likely to be a long time before it can be, but it can at best be assessed as work in progress. I am proud that the Conservative Party has had 2 women Prime Ministers, setting the aspiration for all women candidates. The noble lady Baroness Young blazed the trail as leader of this House nearly 40 years ago. I understand that we must set the goal of equal male and female representation in the other place, and we are very slowly getting there. I believe that preferential treatment is not the way forward. There are, however, so many well-qualified women out there who should be elected, so we must continue to promote and assist. Headway is being made, and the Women to Win is a brilliant association with my noble friend Baroness Jenkins of Kennington, who deserves so much praise for being an inspiration to us all by always working for others. Brexit has, I believe, absorbed our nation and taken some of the matters of urgency off the agenda for now. But we must resolve Brexit and return to normality so we can deal with our national problems. There is so much to do, but we will get there. My Lords, in this debate, we hear of dire situations of so many women across the world where they know what real poverty is. And they value education for their children and will go to any lengths they possibly can to get them there. I congratulate the government on giving us a buoyant economy so that this country can spend 0.7% of our GNP funding aid for developing countries to enable them to grow their economies. Last year, we celebrated the centenary of the first partial emancipation of women, and I am so happy that we were able to ensure that Emmeline Pankhurst remains in her rightful place close to Parliament. She was certainly, with her colleagues, who fought constantly for the status of women throughout her life. She and all of them have been an inspiration, and she certainly deserves to have such recognition. My Lords, in no way am I complacent, but I believe that once a year it is right to be grateful for the progress across the world and be thankful for our own situation, where we take so much for granted. During this next year, we will, I believe, face an exciting future, and I hope a time when we will all come together and be proud of our country and what we stand for, and an example for others, particularly developing nations, to feel they wish to emulate.
Yes. My Lords, there are some debates in your Lordship's House that are remarkable by their gender divide, and today's debate of 35 speakers is about 85% women speakers. But I don't think it's any the poorer for that, and I'm honoured to take part in it and see many people that I've come to regard as friends on other benches. However, when we have a debate in this House on defence or weapons or war...
May I?
I was going to mention you in a minute. Would you wait?
Don't worry. I'll wait till I mention.
Thank you. When we have a debate in this House on defence or weapons or war, the inverse is true. At a political level, even in 2019, wars and weapons and even navies, and the noble Lord West is representing the Navy as ever, are regarded as a man's area. And nowhere is this starker than in the area of nuclear weapons.
Just very briefly, to say part of the reason I think there weren't more men here, and it's been said already, it's very unfortunate this is timed on a Thursday, and I personally would have wanted to speak, but I'm afraid I can't be here at the end of the debate. As far as the Navy goes, 30 years ago, I did the study into employment of women at sea. It was remarkable at that stage how women were really considered as nothing. I said they should go to sea, but it still took time for that to happen.
Well, I thank the noble Lord for his contribution. He proves my point slightly, yet nuclear weapons, including our own Trident system, are those that are specifically targeted at civilians. They target cities, they target women and children as a so-called deterrent. And I want to use my time today to ask the Minister if whether there is a correlation between the lack of women involved and the fact that not only have nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament talks largely stalled, but now we are likely to be heading into a new nuclear arms race, a truly terrifying prospect highlighted by the Noble Lord Howell of Guildford when he talked on the 27th of February, and he said of the evidence they'd heard, we're on the verge of a terrifying new arms race and the possible spread of tactical nuclear weapons, and that the limits on nuclear warfare that the world has hung on to since Hiroshima are now slipping away and could leave our cities in smoking ruins. Your Lordships will remember that back in 2000, the UN passed the Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security to encourage greater female representation on disarmament bodies. That hasn't really happened to the degree that was hoped for then. And one of the women to see this firsthand is United Nations High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, Her Excellency Izumi Nakamitsu. As frequently the only woman at these high-level talks, she says more perspectives could help to find new approaches to break stalemate. Many of you will have heard of the Doomsday Clock, which moves nearer to midnight according to the threats. And right now it's at 2 minutes to midnight because of nuclear war and because of climate change. My Lords, I'm sure for many of you, like me, the moment you had children, the existential threats to the future take on a new urgency. And it was back in the early 80s when the US was planning to, and did, put nuclear-armed cruise missiles in the UK, that the women of Greenham Common were so moved, and Helen John in particular, who was the leader, they raised public awareness, they put the issue firmly in front of politicians and the public. And taking part in that, and on the Ring the Base at Easter time, it made me aware of the power of women acting together to address this terrifying threat to humanity. I believe we need that power again. Of course we need it for climate change. And Greta Thunberg is doing a great job with the much younger generation. The spring uprising in Bristol, I think, is looking at that. But the threat from nuclear weapons hasn't really, I think, taken hold of the urgency that it needs to have the same sort of action amongst the young. We do need nuclear weapon use or possession banned. I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime, but the first step has been taken with the UN treaty last year, the ban treaty that was passed by 122 countries who signed it, sadly not the UK. But when it becomes ratified, it will make nuclear weapon possession or use illegal. So, as we start on the first steps of this process, if humanity and the world as we know it are going to enter the 22nd century, I think we need women far more involved in the process. Men have not really had the impetus or the will to achieve nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament. Women are good negotiators, we're realists, and we invest emotionally in the future. I think women must become involved in the nuclear disarmament effort at every level and fast.
My Lords, it's a great pleasure to speak among so many inspirational women and men as we mark International Women's Day. It's always a privilege to rise in this chamber, but never more so than in this debate today. Given the barriers women face to participation in both political and leadership roles, I'm acutely aware of the privilege we hold as women peers within your Lordship's House. Female representation in Parliament is just one of many advances for women over the last century. Educational attainment, workforce participation, control of reproduction and anti-discrimination laws are all evidence of the scale of change here in the UK and in countries around the globe. But all these gains have failed to translate into equality in terms of leadership. Across the world, women make up just a quarter of parliamentarians. of news media leaders and judges. Just 15% of corporate board seats are occupied by women, and only in healthcare, education and the non-profit sector does female corporate leadership exceed 40%. Change is happening, but it's at a snail's pace. A lack of consistent data makes global progress hard to track, but analysis of LinkedIn data found that over the decade to 2017, the proportion of female leaders increased by just 2% across 12 industry sectors. So despite all the advances that we celebrate to gender equality, it's clear that women still face significant barriers in progressing to leadership roles. Now, some of these are embedded in law. In at least 100 economies worldwide, women face gender-based job restrictions, and in 18 countries, husbands can still legally prevent wives from working. 59% of countries have no law against workplace sexual harassment. More often, though, these barriers are embedded in culture and customs, those unstated norms that conspire to exclude women or prevent them accessing those influential networks that offer a leg up on the ladder to the top. Alongside this, we read that women's educational choices can leave them less prepared than men to prosper in the workplace. And in a wide range of economies, women's access to technology is limited, and so they lack proficiency in what's becoming the critical skill set of the future. And women, as we know, are more likely to carry domestic and caring responsibilities, which leaves them more likely to seek part-time or flexible working. And then, as we've heard, when women do rise to leadership, they continue to face challenge, marginalisation and hostility. We've seen horrific examples of this over recent months in the UK, but this is a worldwide concern. Of 55 female parliamentarians from 39 countries surveyed by the Interparliamentary Union in 2016, almost half reported threats of death, rape and violence. In parallel to this overt hostility, though, is a more insidious form of assault. Blair Williams at the Australian National University wrote her PhD thesis on the ways in which media representation had reinforced gendered and sexist stereotypes in the 3 weeks following the elections to power of Margaret Thatcher in 1979 and Theresa May in 2016. Analysis of newspaper coverage revealed that far from having moved on in the years between the UK's 2 female prime ministers, references to appearance, clothing and gender had actually doubled in some areas of the press. Both women were repeatedly compared to head girls, a term that infantilises women and denigrates their skills and success. An overemphasis on handbags and kitten heels is just one of the not-so-subtle ways in which the media undermines female political leaders at every turn, and in doing so, it undermines women as a whole. So perhaps it's not surprising that across the 4 areas on which the 2018 Global Gender Gap Index reports, the major disparity was in political empowerment. Just 17 of the 149 countries assessed have female heads of state, and on average, only 18% of ministers and, as we've heard, 24% of parliamentarians across the world are women. Why does this matter? I don't need to tell you, but I will. In short, because women's political leadership results in better outcomes for women and girls, which means better outcomes for society more broadly. Research shows women work harder at communicating with their constituents, and there is a correlation between female representation and higher expenditure on social issues. A 2018 study found that when women are the signatories to peace agreements, they're more likely to be implemented and to have longer-lasting effects. There are plenty of quantifiable arguments for women's political empowerment, but even without them, its justification is irrefutable. Women make up half the world's population, and yet their voices are still not equal in the places where decisions are made. The prediction is that it will be 107 years before this particular gender gap is closed. On the eve of International Women's Day, would the noble lady the Minister not agree with me that 107 years is far too long for us all to wait?
My Lords, today is a day to celebrate progress whilst recognising there is more to do. And I want to thank the researchers in the library for providing me with a favourite number, 228. I am only the 228th woman to have been appointed under the Life Peerages Act since 1958. I find this sobering when I think, my lords, of the centuries of history in this chamber. Many barriers do still exist, but I count myself, like my noble friend Lady Seckham, fortunate to be born at this time in this country, where I can own property, start a business or a charity, vote in most elections, and speak my views freely. As a lawyer by profession, there are a growing number of role models. 25% of the Supreme Court judiciary, including its president, are now women. And overseas, the former Attorney General of Canada, Judy Wilson-Raybow's recent testimony defending prosecutorial independence against interference by the Prime Minister should be standard viewing for all law students. But injustices still do exist. The problem of forced marriage led the coalition government to take the positive step of making this a crime. There are cases where the victims are men, but 77% of the victims are women. And of course, to make this criminal law effective, the government changed the definition of marriage to any religious or civil ceremony, whether or not legally binding. Some women, my lords, are brave enough to give evidence against their husbands and perhaps other family members and successfully secure a criminal conviction, proving beyond reasonable doubt that there was a forced marriage. But they are left without a remedy in the civil courts to get their share of matrimonial assets, as the woman is not viewed in the civil law as married. Our law is therefore contradictory. She is married for some purposes, but not for others. It is not the crime of forced cohabitation, it is the crime of forced marriage. This irrational situation, my lords, I believe will last until the first victim of forced marriage obtains media profile of his assets, house, business, and probably most likely the pension that she has no claim on and ends up claiming universal credit. So I'd be grateful if my noble friend the Minister could arrange a further meeting to discuss this gap in our law. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, said Martin Luther King. As a state comprehensive girl from factory working parents, this lofty quote compels me to raise one of the last, in fact maybe the last bastion of direct discrimination against women in UK law. I call it, my lords, the Lady Mary Crawley problem. Downton Abbey was in search of a male heir, as women cannot and still cannot inherit. When we changed the law, my lords, for the monarchy, part of Her Majesty's government's reasons for not getting rid of this discriminatory law was it meant, and I quote, disinheritance of individuals with legitimate expectations to inherit an hereditary peerage. Men cannot possibly rely on legitimate expectations created from direct discrimination against women to prevent law reform. I pay tribute to the work of Daughters' Rights and also wish to put on record that, like many other members of this House, I do not vote in any hereditary peer by-election where there are no women on the ballot paper. My lords, this law directly affects the gender balance in this chamber, and I'd be grateful to hear what Her Majesty's government's view is on this matter today. Finally, my lords, I want to briefly address, as the noble Lady Hussein Etchi did, the double discrimination that many women face, who face the additional barriers and prejudice as they are also from a black and minority ethnic community. I support the recommendation made by the noble Lady Baroness McGregor-Smith outside the chamber that companies should now publish their data on this. It's the next logical step from a gender pay gap reporting requirement to publishing your ethnicity pay gap. But it's not only in business that there is an issue, but actually in the charitable and social investment sectors. The UK, I've discovered, has the fastest growing social investment market in the world, worth £2.3 billion and growing at 17% a year. But black and minority ethnic women are sadly the least likely to hold a directorship in that sector at only 2.8%. I'm also surprised that charities are also underperforming, with 62% of the UK's largest charities having all-white boards of trustees, despite black people being the ethnic group most likely to volunteer each month. Surely there should be some reporting requirement that makes such boards justify this absence of diversity. And I do hope my noble friend the Minister will raise this with the noble Lady Stoll, who's chair of the Charity Commission. I will, my lords, finish work today, as I often do, walking past the statue of Emmeline Pankhurst, and thank God for her life, but today I will also be grateful for her part in enabling me to be female life peer number 228.
These are very brief contributions, and many of us, I know, would love to talk about a much larger range of women's activities and women's contribution across the world. But today I'm going to limit myself to talking about a very small part of a commission that I've chaired over the last 18 months, which was published last week and looked into the experience of the most disadvantaged women in this country who've experienced violence and abuse, and for whom chronic poverty and what has become for them a punitive benefit system often compounds their problems. Without support, many of these women go on to develop mental health problems, to use drugs or alcohol to cope with trauma and abuse, and that then leads them into a downward spiral which will often bring them into in facing the criminal justice system at some stage too. The Commission looked into the experience of those most disadvantaged women. And as I say, many of them go on to develop a whole range of other problems. 1 in 20 women in this country, it is estimated, which is equivalent to about 1.2 million women in England, have experienced extensive physical and sexual violence throughout their lives. More than half of these women have a common mental health disorder, 1 in 3 has an alcohol problem, and 1 in 5 has been homeless. We worked very fully with these women, and one of the real great experiences was that we were able to pick up and train women. They're called women with lived experience, and we trained them as peer researchers. And they then went out and interviewed 18 women in their own locality who were suffering these sorts of disadvantages. And they really were a joy to work with, but I will come back to that. Many women who come to this country expect that they will be safe and protected. They've heard us talk in such positive terms about what advantages we have as women. But their experience when they get here is far from that. And hearing from some of them, I was just ashamed. I want to just give 2 examples where we really need to address the needs of women who have not got settled migration status. We were told that the hostile environment had led to women in abusive relationships who do not have settled status, as I say, fearing reporting what was happening to them, fearing to go and seek for help. Their abusive partner often would say that they would be deported if they did so. Safe pathways to reporting violence against women and girls should be created for all women, not just of those of us who are confident about our position in this society. But the second was the whole issue of no recourse to public funds, which affects people who do not have this settled status. Too many of them are denied support, and that means they are unable to access help and support. They're unable to get access to a refuge, they're unable to get access to alternative accommodation, they don't have any money, and they're certainly not going to be taken on by landlords, and as I say, even refuges, many of them will deny access for that reason. They're unable to get treatment for health care conditions or for what has happened as a result of abuse. I think we have to look very carefully at abolishing this rule for those women in this position. There are some really good practical, I would say that, wouldn't I, practical recommendations in the report, which is called Breaking Down the Barriers. I've not got time to go into them all. I hope your lordships will take the opportunity to at least read the executive summary. At national and local level, we have to make sure that services and NGOs can work across the silos around the needs of individual women. We have to use and employ those women with lived experience. As I say, they're a real inspiration, but they are the ones who know what it's like and are therefore the best first contact, certainly, with other women. And we have to extend the use of trauma-informed work. Too many women present and nobody understands or recognises the consequences of abuse. And so they're pushed from pillar to post, from service to service, and nobody deals with the essential first thing, that they have trauma which is induced from violence and abuse. We have so much we have to do on this, but it can change, it can be done, and I hope we'll all work to make sure it is.
My Lord, it is a great honour to be able to speak in celebration of International Women's Day. It has a special personal meaning for me. On this day, 102 years ago, my mother was born in St. Petersburg, Russia. She lived for 100 years and 2 weeks. When I think of her life's journey, I'm reminded of women's resilience and courage. I'm reminded of the many misfortunes that women of that generation had to endure and overcome. For the first 30 years of her life, hardship and danger were my mother's traveling companions, from Russia on the eve of the revolution, through the years of civil war in Siberia, exile in war-torn China, tragedy in Indochina, where her first husband was killed by the Japanese when she was 9 months pregnant during the World War II, to sanctuary at last in Paris and London. When I think of her life, I remind myself how lucky my generation was to have been born in this country and when we were. Yet, we had our own struggles, and we too needed more than a few drops of determination to overcome them. Those of us who in the 1970s and 1980s decided to forge a career could be confronted by an often intimidating and hostile world, dominated by men, many of whom saw the arrival of women as a threat to their natural order. While at university, I decided to become a commodity broker in the city. I was one of the first women to do so. I enjoyed it enormously. But to get there and stay there, I had to run the gauntlets of harassment, molestation, and abuse, and some of which would make you blush today. The view then was, if you want to make it in a man's world, this was the price you had to pay, and shut up. Today, that kind of behavior, thankfully, is considered as totally unacceptable and often illegal. This is surely something for all of us, men and women, to celebrate. It is an example to the world. And this Conservative government can be proud that female employment is at a record high and gender pay gap at a record low. But there is no room for complacency. Some men will always resist the equal treatment of women. Power too often goes to the head of men who wield it, leading to abuse and bullying. We have seen gross example in the press. So the struggle goes on. Eradicating misogyny is a challenge enough, but we need to move beyond. More women should be positively encouraged and positively helped to become politicians, CEO, firefighters, surgeon, train drivers, whatever they want to do, with equal opportunities and equal rights. And that should be also embracing women who want to stay at home as wife and mother, if that is their choice, without being judged as second-rate by their female peers. The challenge today for women is to get the balance right, not to let the pendulum swing too far in the other direction. Let me explain what I mean. I have a confession to make. I like men. I have 2 sons, 2 stepsons, and a husband. I don't want to emasculate men. I don't want to bludgeon them into submission or turn them into our enemies. I do not want them to be afraid of paying me a compliment, opening a door, or entering the lift alone with me. What I want is, above all, for the vast, decent majority of men to be on our side, to work with us. We don't want to wage a gender war, nor do I believe it is necessary. What we want is to be respected for what we are and who we are. But in turn, we need to do the same, the majority of men, and respect them. So let us include them in our fight. I see today very few men, and I hope that next year maybe the debate will be earlier on so that more men could participate. Because after all, women and men, we're all but one humanity. And this is how I have watched my sons and stepsons grow up, to cherish and respect women as their equals, to enjoy their company, and if this is their choice, to love them too.
My Lords, I am pleased to take part in the International Women's Day debate, which is to recognise and celebrate women's achievements, as well as highlighting the challenges they face across the world. I rise to speak about the plight of Kashmiri women who are living under some of the most difficult conditions in the world. The daily lives of women of Kashmir are controlled by occupying military forces. They don't know when the Indian Army or some other paramilitary force will force their way into their homes, harass them, rape them, beat up family members, and take away the men, some of whom may come back alive with the torture scars. Bodies of some of the others may be found weeks or months later on roadsides, and others may not be seen at all again. The term half-widows is commonly used in Indian-occupied Kashmir for wives of men who have gone missing. According to The Guardian, on 10th of October 2010, while authorities in Kashmir estimate the missing number to be approximately 4,000, the Association of Disappeared Persons estimates there are actually between 8 to 10,000 missing people in the region. The number of publicly announced and reported half-widows in Kashmir Valley is between 2000 and 2005, along with the plight of 6,000 orphans, the children of half-widows who are affected deeply by the conflict. This issue adds so much to the crisis. True data and numbers for the both half-orphans and half-widows are thought to be much higher. According to the detailed report of 2007 reported by award-winning Kashmiri-based journalist Harun Marani, the primary concern of a family is to find their missing person. They move from one police station to another, from one army camp to another, and so on. It takes months and years to find out. India, the pellet gun victims, according to French news channel France 24, on 30th November 2018, India introduced officially non-lethal 12-gauge pellet shotguns in Kashmir in 2010. reliable aggregate data about the number of the injuries and blindings from the pellet guns is hard to come by. Government data from 2017 revealed that a weapon killed 13 people and injured more than 6,000 in 8 months alone, including nearly 800 with eye injuries. The Central Reserve Police Force, the Indian paramilitary deployed in Kashmir, told the court in 2016 that they fired about 1.3 million pellets in just 32 days. Amnesty International has urged the Indian government to ban the use of pellet guns, and lawyers and others groups have appealed to courts, to little avail so far. US-based Physicians for Human Rights has called their use inherently inaccurate and indiscriminate and potentially lethal to human at close range. Rape. There is an estimated figure of between 10 to 12,000 women being raped in the last 3 decades by the security forces. According to the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner report to April 2018, authorities have failed to independently investigate and prosecute allegations of sex violence by security forces personnel. There is no record of allegations of sexual violence by security forces being prosecuted in a civilian court. One significant case that illustrates the state's failure to investigate and prosecute allegations of sexual violence and addressing impunity for sexual crimes in Kashmir is the Kunan Pushpura mass rape, which took place 27 years ago and for which attempts to seek justice have been denied and blocked over the years by the authorities at different levels. According to the survivors and local administration officials, on the night of 23rd February 1991, soldiers from the 4th Battalion, 4th Rajputana Rifles Regiment of the Indian Army gang-raped around 23 women of Kunan Pushpura villages of Kupwara district. The Indian Army and Government of India have denied the allegations. Information received through both written and oral testimonies highlight the use of mass rape allegedly by members of the state security forces, as well as the act of enforced disappearances, killings, and acts of torture and ill treatment which were used to intimidate and to counteract the political opposition. This special rapporteur added that she was not informed of any measures to ensure accountability and redress for victims. My Lords, women in Indian-occupied Kashmir are living lives under siege and constant surveillance, whether in public or in their homes. They, according to the United Nations Council for Human Rights, they are living under the mercy of the security forces for many decades, who operate with complete impunity. These women fear for themselves, their children, brothers, husbands, and fathers, day and night. They are suffering from physical and grave mental traumas. They are in dire need of help. As many of your lordships know, I have stood on these benches of your lordships many times and pleaded for justice and protection of Kashmiri women. But I am disappointed to say that I have not seen our government taking any action at any level in this regard. Britain, being a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council and the head of the Commonwealth, has a huge responsibility towards human rights globally. Just a minute. I know when this comes up, the government ministers are very touchy about it, but let me finish within one minute. And the head of the Commonwealth has the responsibility towards the human rights globally. Sorry. Can I have 1 minute, please? I've finished.
My Lords, everyone has been very good at trying to observe the time advisory limit, and I know members have got undertakings at the end of this debate. If the noble Lord could respect the time limit and bring his remarks to a close, that would be very, very helpful. I'm sorry, you are well in excess of the advisory time limit at the moment, and other members have to be taken into account.
We simply cannot turn a blind eye to the appealing of the horrendous condition that Kashmiri women are having to undergo. May I ask the noble Baroness, the Minister, if she believes dignity, honour and respect of the Kashmiri woman is any different to a British or European woman? And may I ask also, what is she prepared to do to help the women of Kashmir to live a normal life without fear? And what the government would do to raise these issues with the Indian government?
My Lords, sadly, there is still no country in the world where there is true gender equality in political, economic and social terms. International Women's Day this year, with its theme Balance for Better, gives us a chance to take stock, celebrate the successes, but also identify the challenges that remain both at home and abroad. As my noble friend Baroness Jenkins has already mentioned, I and several of my noble friends began political life in the Conservative Women's Organisation, and on Saturday I will be attending the CWO's Centenary Conference. And I would like to pay special tribute to my noble friend Baroness Second, who was Conservative Vice Chairman for Women for 10 years, and to whom so many of us owe our political careers due to her encouragement and mentoring. She has made a real difference to so many on our side. This morning, we had the third reading of the Civil Partnerships, Marriages and Deaths Registration Bill, which I've helped my honourable friend from the other place, Tim Lawton MP, progress through this House. It will bring in simple but important changes to women for women. Since 1837, there has only been provision for a father's name on a marriage certificate, and this will enable mothers to witness marriage certificates too. It also requires the government to prepare a report on how the law should be changed to permit the registration of pregnancy losses before 24 weeks, which cannot be registered as stillbirths under the Births and Deaths Registration Act 1953, and also requires the government to prepare a report on whether coroners should be able to investigate late stillbirths, which would support the current work by the Department of Health to improve maternity safety in the UK. Next week, I and many other women from around the world head to the UN in New York for the Commission on the Status of Women meeting, where this year's theme is about access to public services and sustainable infrastructure for gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. Although CSW is the second largest meeting of the year at the UN, almost nothing is heard about it in the media. While CSW is enormously welcomed, can the Minister please inform us how the UK will work with others to improve the impact that CSW makes across the world? Because in many countries of the world, women desperately need international support. I co-chair and run the APPG on Women, Peace and Security, and we enormously welcomed the UK's fourth National Action Plan on UN Security Council Resolution 1325 last autumn. I would also like to congratulate our Ministry of Defence on launching JSP 1325, Policy for Human Security in Military Operations, which is so vitally important to protect civilians, especially women and children. However, there is still much more work to be done. 18 years after the adoption of UN Special Council Resolution 1325, why are the Syrian women not allowed at the peace table? We should not have to justify why women should be included in peace processes. We should ask the men there to justify why they are excluding them. My Lords, as we look at tentative peace processes in Yemen and Afghanistan, where are the women? You cannot have peace that excludes half the population. And how can we in the UK exert global influence to make sure that the women are included? The Preventing Sexual Violence in Conflict initiative, launched by William Hague in 2012, brought the fact that rape is used today as a weapon of war to global attention. This initiative was always going to be a marathon, not a sprint, and we must ensure that focus is not lost on this important issue. Its relevance is seen today in the conflicts raging, high levels of sexual violence committed by Daesh against the Yazidis, or the terrible stories coming out from the Rohingya camp at Cox's Bazar. Can the Minister please update us on the plans for the PSVI International Conference the UK will host this year, 5 years on from the unforgettable 2014 Global Summit? There are always many inspirational meetings around International Women's Day, but the one that will remain with me this year was the APPG on human rights on Tuesday, when we heard from two journalists, women human rights defenders, Zeyna Arham from Syria and Nurkan Beysal, who is Kurdish from Turkey. Listening to them was truly humbling. We should never forget there are many women around the world who, in spite of constant threat, continue to fearlessly stand up for what they believe in. As we here safely celebrate International Women's Day in the Palace of Westminster, we must hold out our hands to them and offer them our heartfelt help and support.
My Lords, each year when International Women's Day comes round, we can celebrate the extraordinary contributions that women have made both nationally and internationally. We can also celebrate the fact that in many aspects of women's lives, there are improvements over what went before. But we can't be complacent and assume that gender equality is just a few years away. It's not. On present progress, it could be a century or more before the gap is closed, according to the World Economic Forum. And last year, UNDP reported that the disadvantages facing women and girls are a major source of inequality and are one of the greatest barriers to human development progress. In considering these barriers, I want to focus on the sexual and reproductive health of women and girls in poor developing countries. Unless this is addressed, millions of young women will not achieve their potential as fully engaged citizens, and many will suffer horribly. The subject of this debate is the UK's role in advancing gender equality globally, and it is my contention that there can be few areas more worthy of our attention and our commitment to a better life for women and girls than this one. One source of vulnerability is the lack of education. In spite of the huge advances in access to education in many countries, girls are still more likely to leave secondary education before completing it than boys. Girls with poor levels of literacy and lacking the capacity to obtain secure employment are likely to become the victims of sexual abuse and exploitation and of being trafficked. They're also more likely to be pushed into very early marriage. So extending the education of girls must be part of a preventive strategy to promote the improvement of the lives of young women in poor countries and countries where there is a prevailing culture which fails to recognize the rights of women. One of the most horrific statistics I've seen for a long time is that in the South Sudan, where 72% of children are out of school, a girl is more likely to die in childbirth than complete secondary education. According to the UN, in 2017, an estimated 21% of women between the ages of 20 and 24 were married or in an informal union before the age of 18, and 1 in 3 girls aged 15 to 19 had been subjected to FGM in the 30 countries where it's most concentrated. Very early marriage and FGM run the risks of problems in childbirth. Both need to be prevented. New laws specifying a minimum age of marriage at, say, 18 would be of great value. There also needs to be better information about the risks of giving birth at too young an age, and better access to contraceptive services are vital. If a young girl does become pregnant, she will need to obtain antenatal care, which can identify if she's at risk and likely to need specialist help during childbirth. Where it is legal, advice should be available on access to safe abortion. In remote and rural areas, and in those countries where there is conflict, it is especially important to try to provide these services through development aid programs. I'd be grateful if the Minister could say what priority is being given to them by DFID. I ask this against the fact that the leading cause of death for 15 to 19-year-olds globally is complications from pregnancy and childbirth. Around 11% of all births worldwide are to girls aged 15 to 19, but according to the UN Population Division, there are 1 or 2 countries where the adolescent birth rate is as high as 200 births per 100 girls, compared to a global average of 44 births per 100 girls of this age. Whilst overall maternal mortality has declined, there are still, my lords, far too many preventable deaths, especially of adolescents. The involvement of DFID in the sexual and reproductive health and rights agenda is very welcome, but I'd like to raise 2 or 3 points of clarification about how it's taking this work forward. First, can it be more clearly articulate its vision in this area and give it greater priority, and give greater priority to the neglected areas of safe abortion and the care of at-risk adolescents before and during childbirth? Second, when it articulates its vision for comprehensive sexual and reproductive health and rights, can it translate them into concrete measures in all DFID country plans, ensuring that fragile and conflict-affected areas are included? And third, will it ensure that family planning is given high priority in its programs and support national governments in sustaining the supply and distribution of contraceptives? In conclusion, I hope that the needs of girls and women who are still suffering from a denial of access to good reproductive health care will remain central to the UK's programmes under DFID and overseas development aid spent by other departments. Even if it's not going to be achieved in my lifetime, I want my daughter and my granddaughters at some future International Women's Day to be able to celebrate global equality in the provision of sexual and reproductive health rights. My lords, we still have a long way to go.
My lords, the theme for International Women's Day is to think equal, build smart, innovate for change, but innovation by women and girls, for women and girls, at the heart of productiveness to achieve a gender balance. Achieving a gender-equal world requires social innovations that work for both women and men and leave no one behind. From urban planning that focuses on community safety to e-learning platforms that take classrooms to women and girls, affordable quality childcare centres and technology shaped by women. So, my lords, such innovation can take the race for gender equality to its finishing line by 2030, but we've had a different figure off the Noble Minister at the very beginning of this debate. But I know we can achieve the Sustainable Development Global Goal number 5, which is gender equality. It begins with making sure that women's and girls' needs, and more importantly, their experiences and voices, are integrated at the very inception of technology and innovations. It means building smart solutions that go beyond acknowledging the gender gaps to addressing the needs of men and women equally. Of course, ultimately, it needs innovations that disrupt businesses as usual by paying attention to how and by whom technology is used and accessed, and ensuring that women and girls play a pivotal role in emerging industries. Global youth organisations proudly operating from the UK are driving this agenda forward with great results such as World Merit. I had the great pleasure of speaking to over 200 young people global-wide, being in a room full of vibes, together as one, as they said. No gender divide in that room. Teamwork thrived. As Victims Commissioner of England and Wales, I thought, how could I add this? Because I can only get to Wales, I'm not allowed to go outside. But I do think there is a part, and we need to bring their voices into this chamber. And as Melinda Gates said, a woman with a voice is by definition a strong woman. But the search for that voice can be remarkably difficult. My lords, as Victims Commissioner, I travel up and down the country, meeting many victims and survivors of horrendous crimes of domestic abuse, sexual abuse and rape. Sitting with them face to face, telling me their stories, coming from the darkest places that they were so brutally trodden down by their abusive partners that said they loved them. Standing here today as a proud mother of 3 beautiful young daughters who are all psychologically damaged because they witnessed every kick and punch of their father's brutal murder. Well, my lords, as Melinda Gates said, searching for that voice is remarkably difficult. I stand here to say, listening how they survive, all the victims of domestic abuse, sexual abuse, rape, children across our country, the passion in their voices to create a life for the next generation is so important. We need to have that message in this country as well as globally. My lords, this is such an important debate. I am sad that we're at the end of the list. Typical women at the end, but we've got a voice, and we should have a 2-day debate on this, not like Brexit that we have at the moment. Because I believe coming together as one, as we all have a part to play in making our words come to life, because our needs and our words and our fight for the next generation are so important.
Yeah.
My lords, it is a pleasure to be taking part in this debate today, and I thank the noble Baroness for ensuring we have the opportunity to speak ahead of International Women's Day tomorrow. My lords, we are all aware that women all over the world face a huge number of problems, including violence, sexual harassment, abortion laws, pay and pension gaps, FGM, trafficking, modern slavery, and other human rights violations. However, there is one issue that has not been highlighted much, and that is that of widows. I declare my interest here as the founder and chairman trustee of the Lumba Foundation. My lords, there are estimated 258 million widows around the world. Sadly, their number is increasing every day due to conflicts in many countries, including Syria, Iraq, Somalia, Yemen, Nigeria, South Sudan, Congo, the Central African Republic, and more recently in Venezuela and some South American countries. Widows and their daughters in conflict zones face extremes of abuse, violence, including sexual violence. Both conflict-afflicted mothers and daughters are vulnerable to traffickers, sexual slavery, forced temporary remarriage, and modern-day slavery. Then there is a question of half-widows. My lords, there are uncounted millions of wives of men forcibly disappeared or missing. In Colombia, 86,000 missing. In Sri Lanka, 40,000. In Syria, Iraq, uncounted missing husbands, sons, brothers. In so many conflict zones, men go missing, lie unidentified in mass graves. These women are in limbo, unable to make any closer, their status so ambiguous. My lords, these women, widows, half-widows, and their daughters need help if we want to achieve gender equality as well as the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. I was extremely pleased when the Noble Lord Bates called a meeting in his office last month, inviting a few organizations who work for widows to discuss and understand the problems which widows face across the world, especially in the developing countries. It was a constructive meeting, and I truly appreciate the initiative taken by him. My lords, gender balance is not just a theme, it is a way of life we should all aspire to achieve around the world. We need to make an extra effort in developing countries and fragile states suffering from conflict, where the input into the civil life from the female population is often very limited. Empowerment of women, and especially marginalized widows who are doubly discriminated against, will not only help them but also improve the lives of many more people in their communities living through conflict and strife. My lords, I urge the noble minister that a specialist unit should be set up in the Department for International Development to focus on widows and their issues. In my opinion, we really need to address this issue and to provide skills training to widows and their unmarried daughters so that they can become self-reliant, earn money, educate their children, support their families, and lead a life of dignity and equality.
My Lords, just before I came into the chamber this afternoon, I heard the very sad news that the principal of my old college, Sister Dorothy Bell, had died. And I just wanted to put on record that she was a strong, compassionate, very funny, and great supporter of other women. She was a person that I'll never forget. She's now in Hansard, and I'm sure in heaven. I'm delighted to be taking part again in this year's Lord's debate to celebrate International Women's Day. And I thank the noble lady, Baroness Williams of Trafford, for setting out the many positive initiatives the government has put forward or is supporting, especially in the field of violence against women. Like my noble friend, Baroness Gale, I am, however, dismayed that this may be the last such debate with us as members of the European Union. An EU which has been the bedrock of women's and family rights legislation for 4 decades. We discuss the Irish backstop a great deal in this House, but the EU's historic backstop in the protection of women's workplace rights is a story still to be told. EU law underpins the Equality Act 2010, including rights to equal treatment for part-time workers, the majority of them women, rights to health and safety protection for pregnant workers, rights to maternity leave, emergency time off for dependents, and parental leave. As chair of the Women's Rights Committee in the European Parliament in the early 1990s, when this country signed up to the Maternity Leave Directive, I'm inclined to take these issues personally. The TUC and the BMA and others have written to us setting out their concerns that while the government has committed to maintaining equality rights and transposing other rights into UK law upon withdrawal from the EU, those rights could become vulnerable to amendment, to narrower interpretation, and to weaker enforcement following Brexit. So for me, Brexit is no good for women. My Lords, it is inspiring to think that debates such as ours today are taking place in parliaments all around the world this week, from countries where voting rights for women are over a century old to those where women have only just won the vote. And one of the themes of this year, as I understand it, is the need to highlight the gender-digital divide. And that divide is highlighted indeed in our own excellent Lord's Library's research for this debate today. An analysis of labour markets in 2018 by the World Economic Forum focused specifically on the gender gap in artificial intelligence. It found that globally, 22% of AI professionals were female, compared to 78% who were male. This produced a gender gap of 72%, and the WEF stated that this remained constant and I quote, does not at present indicate a positive future trend. The study ranked the UK 10th globally for its AI talent pool, with 20% female. My lords, 3 worrying future trends come out of these figures. That the AI skills gender gap may exacerbate the gender gaps in economic participation and opportunity for women, as AI represents an increasingly in-demand skill set. Secondly, the AI skills gender gap implies that general-purpose technology across various fields is being developed without women's talent, so limiting its innovative and inclusive capacity. And thirdly, the low integration of women into artificial intelligence talent pools represents such a missed opportunity in a sector where there is insufficient supply of adequately qualified talent. My lords, by 2030, some estimates tell us that up to 9 million people's jobs will be replaced by AI. It is the future, whether we like it or not, and not enough women and girls are creating that future. Absolutely. I would like to hear what the noble Baroness Vere, has to say, and I'm sure she is as concerned as we are about these figures and what she believes the government can do about it. Thank you.
Lords, I also thank the Minister for bringing this important debate before us today and for her opening remarks. It was Rosa Parks who said, "Knowing what must be done does away with fear." It was her quiet determination not to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama in 1955, which was the catalyst for the civil rights movement. It is perhaps not a coincidence that it was a woman, indeed a black woman, who symbolically gave birth to one of the greatest ever freedom and equality movements. Gender and race often go hand in hand in the struggle for equality. Since Montgomery, much has been said and done about these issues, but there is still more to be achieved. As Rosa Parks said, we need to act on what we know must be done. One of the strongest female role models in my life was my mother, who came to Britain from Jamaica. She worked as an auxiliary nurse. She used to tell me, "John, being black is not a profession. Make sure you get a good education." Once, in sheer desperation, when I was about 10, I retorted, "Mom, you're just picking on me because I'm black." Well, my lords, that argument failed to resonate with my mother. I can't think why. My lords, there are numerous women of colour who have historically overcome the obstacles of racism and issues connected with gender. They include Mary Seacole, the Crimean war nurse, and the black suffragette Sarah Parker Redmond. Although overdue, last year the first statue of a woman was unveiled in Parliament Square, alongside a lineup of male leaders. This was of the suffragette campaigner Millicent Fawcett. Could the noble minister explain what plans the government has to ensure more women are represented in this way in our public places? As we celebrate the centenary of women in Parliament, my American wife Laura was very keen to remind me that the first woman to take her seat as an MP in the House of Commons in 1919 was Nancy Astor, originally from the United States. Turning to more recent times, as a journalist, I interviewed some inspirational women from BME communities. For example, Dame Kelly Holmes, who overcame a challenging upbringing, rose through the ranks in the army and won 2 Olympic gold medals. Also, the Reverend Rose Hudson Wilkin, who came to England from Jamaica as a child. She, as you know, is now chaplain to the Queen and, of course, also performs that role brilliantly in the House of Commons. Although 20% of small and medium-sized companies are run by women, there is still so much untapped business talent among women, especially amongst BMEs. As we all know, most corporate boards are still mainly male and white. And so my next question for the Minister is this: what plans does the government have to encourage the increase of women company directors? There are other ongoing issues, such as the pay gap between women and men's earnings and the cost of childcare. When I was a district councillor in the Midlands in the 1980s, I remember a lady complaining to me that her take-home pay was so low it would not even take her home. Well, I'm not sure much has changed for women in low-paid jobs. My Lords, according to the Women in Work Index report by PricewaterhouseCoopers last year, the closure of the gender pay gap would produce a £90 billion boost to the UK economy. In the developing world, it is widely recognised that empowering women is an important step to driving economic growth. What plans does the government have to help reduce the gender pay gap? Between 2015 and 2016, according to the same report, the UK fell from 14th to 15th place in a ranking of 33 OECD countries based on 5 key indicators of female economic empowerment. My Lords, as the 5th richest economy in the world, surely we can do better than that. So my next question for the Minister is, will she explain what plans the government has to address this backward step? We are going backwards. There's still a need for more women in science, technology, engineering, and as university vice-chancellors. I say this as a former Chancellor of Bournemouth University, which had, at the time, one of the few female vice-chancellors. Women-led businesses contribute about £82 billion gross value to the British economy. I acknowledge that the government does try to give support to first-time business owners. There is a Broadband Challenge Fund, for example, but the budget is modest and it's linked only to 13 localities. What will the government do to expand that particular project? I would like to suggest that one of the most inspirational women role models in the world is our sovereign, the Queen. For the last 67 years, we've had a female head of state. Let's not forget that. She's continued to conduct herself with dignity and poise throughout, during smooth and rough times. And lastly, my Lords, we must not forget that women making a contribution to an economy is not a new thing. There were prominent women business leaders in the Bible over 2,000 years ago. For example, in the book of Acts, Lydia ran a fashion company, Priscilla owned an upmarket residence franchise, and Queen Candace governed her nation's economy. There was also Deborah in the book of Judges, who was the nation's chief lawyer. There are many more examples. These biblical heroines, and indeed women of today, show that women are a real voice, not just an echo.
I thank the Noble Baroness Williams of Trafford for moving the motion to mark International Women's Day, and I'm very proud to take part. My Lords, tackling injustices like the gender pay gap is part of building a country that works for everyone. It is simply good business sense to recognise the enormous potential of women and to take action to support and help progress female talent. Seeing more women FTSE 100 board members with a target of 33% of women on boards by 2020 is ambitious, but it is part of a commitment to drive forward workplace equality and to look for those opportunities that demolish those barriers. Already many of the UK top companies are leading the way in making sure everyone's contributions to the workplace are valued equally. But my Lords, the gender pay gap isn't going to close on its own. With diversity, BAME women, disabled women and younger women are still woefully underrepresented and have experienced significant discrimination over the past years. Sciences and gender equality are both vital for the achievement of the internationally agreed development goals, including the 2013 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In many cases, it is a long-standing bias, and gender stereotypes are still steering girls and women away from science-related fields. Women's employment continues to be on the rise in traditional male-dominated STEM fields. In 2018, head engineers were
at Google, Adobe, Lockheed Martin, Apple, SpaceX and General Motors, who are not only breaking barriers as women in STEM, but also as women from diverse racial backgrounds. But still women are deeply underrepresented. My Lords, 2018 saw women breaking the Nobel Prize barriers, with Professor Donna Strickland becoming the first woman in 55 years to win the Nobel Prize for Physics, joining a very small group which included Marie Curie. And Professor Frances Arnold shared joint honours in the Nobel Prize for Chemistry, the 5th woman ever to win the award. What role models to aspire to? Studies continue to confirm that girls and women have just as much natural aptitude as men when it comes to STEM subjects. My Lords, the message is getting clearer. Girls and women are getting the message they belong in the computer science as much as boys and men, where no one should be told that they can't. We are seeing more computer science jobs being projected to grow 15% to 20% through to 2020. But the majority of these positions, it is thought, will be filled by men. As STEM-related industries on the whole add over 1.7 million jobs in the coming years, we do not want to see a noticeable absence of women in the field. This at a time when technology continues to rapidly transform the way we live. We can and should work to empower more young women to take an active role in that transformation, to encourage young women to be challenging and confident and look past everything when entering a male-dominated field with aspirations of making their own individual mark. But the lack of a visible female role models continues to be a major problem. So we have to raise the interest in STEM subjects at every stage of the STEM skills pipeline. Earlier and earlier, even at primary school, will intrigue those young inquiring minds to help think about their futures in the tech industry. For the tech industry stands ready, I think, to turn pink. Finally, my Lords, it's not only about enticement of pay, but it's about female talent can bring to STEM and the impact on STEM itself. The UK and the world for women is ready and will change. It's about stating the fact you can be what you want to be. My Lords, the race is on.
Yeah. My Lords, it is an honour to contribute to this important debate, and I too thank my noble friend, the Minister. I'm very privileged to be a founding ambassador of Women Supporting Women for the Prince's Trust. We are committed to supporting and inspiring young women to build their own futures through skills, education and employment. And female employment is, as we have heard, at a record high. This is worthy of celebration, and to be clear, we are celebrating fairness first and foremost. But we are also celebrating the means by which we can capitalise on the economic opportunity that empowering women gives us. And that is that businesses with more women in senior positions perform better. McKinsey has estimated that bridging the gender gap completely would add £150 billion to the UK economy by 2025. My Lords, today I would like to focus on a specific and vital aspect of our economy, namely technology. And I say aspect quite deliberately, because technology is not a sector. It is everywhere. It will change every industry and impact every business. It is the means by which we will stay competitive and future-proof our economy. If we do not deliver gender equality and opportunity in tech, we are missing the biggest opportunity of all. Economic opportunity in the sense of fairness should pervade our attitude to female economic empowerment. But there is another area that I would like to touch on, and that is tackling inherent gender bias in applications of technology that impact every aspect of our economy and our society. Because if we don't, since tech is the ultimate means to more productive ends, all of these ends will have gender bias baked in. We've heard about bias in recruitment, no different in tech than in other industries. But what if the algorithms that actually assist with recruitment and candidate screening are only written by men and effectively for men? Then we will simply see current cohorts replicate themselves, and a perpetual cycle repeated. Artificial intelligence is just that. It is artificial. And the artifice comes from people who create the algorithms, who code the inputs into the black boxes that spit out outputs. The data on which these algorithms are trained and developed will itself reflect historic biases. So this is about both getting female coders into developing the AI of the future and making sure we're taking steps to address biases in the data they all work with. And Baroness Crawley has so eloquently raised many of the issues around artificial intelligence. So what can be done about it? In short, we can choose to have a responsible approach to algorithms and the principles of human conduct that govern them. There are a few emerging initiatives that should give us all hope. I was fortunate to be part of the House of Lords Select Committee on Artificial Intelligence, and we specifically addressed algorithmic bias in our report, saying, developers set the parameters for machine learning algorithms, and the choices they make will intrinsically reflect the developers' beliefs, assumptions, and prejudices. The main ways to address these kind of biases are to ensure that developers are drawn from diverse gender, ethnic, and socio-economic backgrounds, and are aware and adhere to ethical codes of conduct. My Lords, this is a simple analogue solution to a very complex digital problem. If the people who write the algorithms are reflective of the community, then their outcomes are likely to be just. Whilst the government did not accept in full our recommendation to use the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund to address this diversity issue, I am confident it is an agenda we can deliver against. And this is through the world's first Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation, an advisory body dedicated to strengthening and improving the UK's use of data and artificial intelligence. I am fortunate to be a member of the board, and we see algorithmic bias as one of our first priorities. Through this work, we have the opportunity not just to address the risks of exacerbating unfairness, but instead to harness the power of these systems in the cause of diversity, to tackle bias and increase opportunity for all. The Centre will be bringing together expertise from across sectors and society, but also, and importantly, listening intently to public voice and ensuring our governance of these transformative technologies reflects our society's values. My Lords, technology creates new opportunities for our economy, but it also poses new challenges. I am confident that if we act decisively to address gender bias in tech, we will reap all the economic benefits that technology and female economic empowerment can bring, as well as all of the societal benefits.
My Lords, I have just come back from India. It was my annual visit. I have been going to India for many years, every year, just to see what's changed, what's got better, what's got worse. I was very distressed this time. Things have not got better, and they don't seem to be getting better, particularly in relation to women. And I feel now very strongly I don't want to go back again because things are so bad. It really was hurtful to me, personally hurtful to me, how difficult women's lives were. India has the largest number of poorest people in the world, and you can imagine who are the poorest of the poorest. It's always the women. They say that men spend 37% of their earnings on their families. The rest they need to enjoy themselves. So you can imagine that doesn't help much. If they earn more, they just still give them only what they wish to give them. India is a country of Indias. We mustn't think of India as one large cohesive country, because it is not. And each part of India, each state has its own culture, its own food, its own dress, and some of us can even tell where somebody is from, which state somebody is from. And having said that, I have to tell you that the North is much worse for women than the South. In the South, they still have some respect for women. They don't do the sort of things that get done to them in the north. Mumbai is much better for women than Delhi. Delhi is pretty bad, and there are a lot of rapes and attacks on women, and very few people get caught because it's never considered the top priority, as we all know. So this sort of thing is very distressing. Modi said, the present Prime Minister, who will be facing election very soon, said that he's going to work on making women's lives better. I don't think he has done very much. He stopped the abortion thing, aborting girl babies in his state, Gujarat, that reduced it by quite a bit. But it's still happening in the northern provinces. It's just rife. In Haryana, it is 12% more men than girls. And then what they do is even more horrible. They get a girl, they buy a girl, Nepali or Bangladeshi or something, and then when one man has a baby, he passes her on to another man to have a baby. I tell you, sometimes when you think about women's lives, you can't actually stay sane. It's so bad. And Baroness Seckham said, we're very fortunate to live in this country. I think we should realize that. We're very fortunate to live in this country. And I hope that all the women who live here would know that, because they all complain all the time. I call that a British disease. Moan, moan, moan all the time, whatever it is, whether it's the weather or whatever. So, yes, we are better off here. There's no question of it. In this poor country, there's just been a wedding of a very, very rich man of his daughter. The wedding cards cost 100,000 rupees, which could have fed several families for a whole year. This man spent so much money in his daughter's wedding. And again, to me, that's an obscenity. How could he do that? And in our culture, when you have a wedding, you go and feed the poor at the same time, because that's what you do. He didn't feed a single person. So all these things together have put me off going back. There's another issue in Haryana. If a girl and boy marry without permission of parents, they find them out in one of the big cities because they have agents, and they kill them. So, it's just so bad. Now, I have set up a charity which is not showing any success, but it's called Women Matter. I have discovered by visiting a lot of projects and things that if a woman earns even a small amount of money, she changes. She changes, her family changes, her status changes, everything changes. And it's very quick. It doesn't take years, it takes weeks. Suddenly she's somebody because now she can bring money. So this whole idea is to try and get companies to employ poor women, not the educated ones, but poor women. Give them a little training if necessary. Women are very hungry, they train very quickly. So this is something which I'm trying to do, a little bit unsuccessfully at the moment. I just wanted to say to Baroness Hussain Eche that about girls and boys, Muslim girls and boys. I used to teach immigrant women, and there's no question that the girls learn more quickly, are more assiduous, but those are the girls born here, or at least very young when they come here. The ones who come as wives, they have a different problem. So that is the thing. But boys don't do anything because they're the little princes. Why should they bother? And this is another issue, how the men, are so much more important than the women, always, everywhere. So one last word, if I may, is about faith, religion, faith. Religions have not supported women. I don't know how you all feel about it, but they do not, I'm stopping. They have not supported women. If they had supported women, it would have been a lot better for us.
My Lords, I thank my noble friend the Minister for bringing today's debate and for giving us the opportunity to celebrate International Women's Day. It's humbling as ever to follow in the footsteps of such inspiring women on this important day. But in this august chamber, which has seen the debate and passage of many important bills that further the cause of gender equality, it is perhaps time to recognise the limits of legislation in getting us where we need to be. I say this on the 100th anniversary of the Sex Discrimination Act, which opened up the professions and universities to women, an essential step, but not nearly sufficient when it comes to true equality of opportunity across the gender divide. What we now see is a system where the letter of the law is gender neutral, but in practice we are a long way from declaring victory. For a start, we cannot legislate away a sexist culture. The law protects us in extremis, but not from everyday casual sexism, and it happens to all of us. Only recently, as I insisted on a particular deal in the contract, my boss was asked, how do you put up with her? In a man, it's attention to detail, and in a woman, it's what? Nagging? Being bossy? Sorry, the page is mixed up. There we are. I've long argued against a narrow focus on quotas, preferring merit and persuasion. But the time has come to ask, who is deciding the merit? We need to stop playing by male rules and unpick the male bias that pervades every aspect of our economy and society. The Hampton-Alexander Review into improving gender balance in the FTSE leadership found that merit was coded male. Briefs to recruit people to senior positions are basically written for men. Concerns were often raised that women lacked city experience because they were less well known on the networking circuit. Similarly, in a recent book called Invisible Women, it was found that anything from crash test dummies to office heating settings to medicine dosage was all coded for men. We now live in an age where female qualities are better understood and recognised. In the magnificently titled book, Why Do So Many Incompetent Men Succeed at Work?, the author highlights the bias towards confidence as a quality and even self-absorption. This blocks opportunities for women, for women, and indeed for men who do not as obviously exhibit those qualities. The question, my lords, is not whether male and female brains are different, but why society still insists on labelling male brains as better. My daughter, studying physics at university, was recently appalled by the treatment by male students of a top female lecturer. They repeatedly interrupted her, questioning her analysis and intelligence in a way that they simply didn't do with their male professors. And this isn't an isolated incident. Studies show that students appear to evaluate women poorly simply because they are women. Top companies know the benefits that ensue from more gender diversity, not least in financial performance. But despite some excellent progress, there still remains a profound sense of inertia. Indeed, the Hampton-Alexander Review demonstrates that even with the facts on superior performance and the prospect of more transparency and disclosure, listed companies can continue and do continue to resist change. In a debate last year in this chamber on women in public life, the Noble Baroness Kennedy made the point that we've tried to make nice and adjust our demands to the male norm, but it was time to structurally re-engineer our whole society. Only then will we be able to unpack inbuilt cultural gender bias that the law can't reach. The Noble Baroness's speech resonated in so many ways. Countless times I have been told not to make a fuss. But we need to be less complacent and we need to continue to fight. The Noble Baroness finished her remarks by calling for quotas and all-women shortlists. In the face of the evidence and the lack of progress, this is harder to resist. We need to stop messing around and take this agenda seriously. It's worth making a fuss. Until and unless we do so, women will be behind for another century, and that, my lords, is simply not acceptable.
My lords, this afternoon's debate marks the culmination of a whole week of questions addressed to government on the role, rights and restrictions faced by women in our communities, our nation, and indeed the world. I hesitated long and hard before adding my name to the speakers list. I somehow felt that I should listen rather than speak on such a day and on such a subject. But my wife, she counts the Pankhurst sisters among her forebears. "Put your name down," she said. And I did. I congratulate all those who are contributing to our deliberations, and in the end, I'm delighted to be counted among their numbers. The library briefing for this debate identifies key issues and addresses them in the main by means of statistics. This allows us to look quantitatively at various aspects of the situations faced by women, domestic violence, representation in the boardroom and senior management, the gender pay gap, our educational system, questions related to health, and participation in leadership and political life. This approach allows us to build an evidence-based picture, to spot trends, and to measure success or lack of success in efforts to build a world of equal opportunity, equal rights, and equal rewards. It offers a vital tool as we move forward. The last thing we need today is to be damned with faint notes of paternalism. Some nice, comforting words, cheap words, from someone like me about solidarity and support for the struggle, high-minded, good things like that. Well, I do want to stand in solidarity. I want keenly to offer support, but I'd prefer that to be measured by what I do rather than by what I might choose to say. My reason for adding my voice to so many others today may be thought somewhat strange. It's self-interest that has driven me to speak. I'm tired of being part of a culture heir to a history of patriarchal domination. As a 21st century man, I'm weary of feeling imprisoned within a stereotype, the stereotype of male power, trapped on the wrong side of all those statistics, part of an unfair and unjustifiable system. So I long for continuing and accelerating progress in the journey towards gender equality, certainly for its own sake, but also, undeniably, because the freedoms that will thus be enjoyed by women will bring consequential freedoms to men too. As a white man, I could put forward an almost identical case for race equality. As a straight heterosexual man, I could do the same for justice for people of all sexual identities. As a Christian, I long for the extirpation of all that smells of anti-Semitism or Islamophobia. As a relatively well-off person, I know I must fight the corner of the dispossessed and the marginalized. Progress in any of these fields of endeavor will inevitably bring benefits to me too. The freedom of others is the best possible guarantee of something approaching freedom for me. Selfish? I suppose so. Motivating? Definitely. Let me bow out with some lines from the poet John Donne. The relevant lines for the point I've been trying to make will be obvious, but I've left a couple of words, 2 or 3 words in that are superfluous to my argument, but are not without their importance at this time. We all know the words anyway. No person is an island. Everyone is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less. Those were the words, just in case you hadn't guessed. Any person's inequality diminishes me, because I am involved in humankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for me. I'm more than grateful, my lords, for the opportunity to speak on a day like this and on such a noble subject, and to express the hope that I might be a beneficiary of all the progress that's being aspired to in those who've contributed thus far to this debate.
It is a great pleasure to speak in this debate, which, as others have said, is an occasion for celebration. It's also an occasion for publicising what more needs to be done, and an opportunity for renewing the energy and commitment for more advocacy and more change. It's an enormous area, and I will talk specifically about health and just part of health. But let me just at the start say, health, of course, is a field where, of course, women play by far the largest role, a fact which is not always, if ever, recognised and acknowledged. Let me start at the celebratory end and congratulate Dr. Rupert Datt and colleagues at Women in Global Health and its sister organisation, Women Leaders in Global Health. Women in Global Health aims to achieve gender equality in global health leadership in order to achieve better global health. Leadership in health globally is very largely male, but as Women in Global Health argues, there are many excellent and well-qualified women who are simply not recognised. Women in Global Health works to increase their visibility and the opportunities for inclusion in leadership at all levels everywhere. They advocate for organisations to adopt gender-equal leadership, draw leaders from the entire talent pool, and address inefficiencies caused by gender inequality that weaken global health. And it's great to see that Women in Global Health is growing in membership and influence. And it's very important to note the point that gender balance, in the way they describe it, is fundamentally important to improving health globally. Let me widen this out a bit by talking about nursing. Now, nursing is not a gendered profession, but nevertheless about 80% of nurses globally are women. And incidentally, although this is not my main point, of course, it needs to attract more men into nursing. It's one of the few fields where there will be enormous growth in recent years, and we need to involve the whole population in it. The All-Party Parliamentary Group on Health, Global Health, reviewed nursing globally recently, and we found across all countries a systematic undervaluing of nurses, a devaluing really, an underutilisation in the sense of nurses being well trained but not being able to work up to the top of their potential, or as the Americans might put it, to the top of their licence. Comments were made in our survey like, we're invisible, we're taken for granted, we're kept down, we're seen as just being nice women and doing what doctors told them, and they're not being seen as truly trained professionals or allowed to work as true professionals. Now, the evidence for why this is happening seems to be partly because most nurses are women, and the influence about how women are treated in particular countries seems to be reflected in the way nurses are treated in those countries, but also partly because they're not doctors, and there's obviously some territorialism here about who does what. But whatever the cause, this is the most extraordinary waste of talent, of passion, of commitment, and frankly of resources if we have the largest part of our workforce globally who are not able to work to their full potential and contribute fully. Moreover, as our report Triple Impact, which came from that study, shows, that if you develop nursing, you not only improve health, you not only promote gender equality, as I've just described, but you also promote the economy, not least by, in countries in Africa, for example, involving more women in the cash economy. And of course, as has already been said by my noble friend Baroness Flather, women, when they have money in their pockets, are more likely to spend it more effectively and for the benefit of a wider range of people. So there are three big wins by promoting and developing nursing. And that's why my noble friend Baroness Watkins and I set up Nursing Now to improve health globally by raising the profile and status of nursing. So I have three questions about what the UK can do to advance gender equality globally. The first is, what is government doing to support the aims and work of women in global health? The second is, what is government doing to raise the status and profile of nursing in the way that I've described, beyond their very welcome support for the campaign Nursing Now, which ministers have already pledged? And finally, if I may raise a domestic issue, noble lords will know that the majority of carers in this country are women, and that almost all of them are on 0 hours contracts. It would be interesting to know whether or not the government recognises this as a problem, and if so, what it will be doing about it.
My Lords, I declare my interest as set out in the register, and it is my honour to speak today in the debate where I would like to pay tribute first to our Prime Minister and to the noble lady, the Minister, and to her team for commitment to women's rights and gender equality. I welcome the government's commitment to ensuring that victims of gender-based violence are supported, perpetrators are brought to justice, and everything possible is done to prevent these crimes happening in the first place. I also particularly welcome the government's commitment to tackling domestic violence and the introduction of the Domestic Violence Bill. I'm sure that every one of us here either knows or is aware of someone who has been a victim of domestic violence. We are all aware of the tendency to avoid talking about this behaviour even when we see it and recognise it. We have to break that taboo and stigma and support families who endure this despicable, shameful and pathetic behaviour in all its manifestations and strengthen our laws and institutions accordingly. My Lords, our willingness to confront entrenched gender violence and harassment in our own society should be matched by an equal determination to defend the rights of the most vulnerable women in the world. Indeed, the test of our commitment to women's rights is how we behave as a country in the most challenging of situations. I would like to raise 3 issues in that regard. 2 months ago, the US envoy for the Afghan conflict, Zalmay Khalilzad, announced that a framework for a peace agreement had been agreed with the Taliban. The United States would withdraw its troops. In return, the Taliban would undertake to prevent Afghanistan being used by terrorists for attacks on other countries. There are many unasked questions and great concern that the women in Afghanistan are once again in the sight of the Taliban. The Taliban negotiator has said explicitly that they reject the constitution of Afghanistan, which enshrines the principle of equal rights of men and women and Afghan women's rights to education, political participation and economic opportunity. Our government has welcomed the progress made by the US Special Representative, and I hope that this support is not unqualified. Afghan women's groups from across 34 provinces have recently come together to issue a declaration that states, "We, Afghan women, request the government negotiating team to fully defend our rightful and legitimate demands at every stage of the peace process and prevent any type of compromise that undermines the achievements of women." They go on to say that they expect the international community to firmly adhere to their commitments to protecting democratic, civil and human rights in Afghanistan. My Lords, I look to the noble lady, the Minister, to give assurances that our government will listen to Afghan women, that we will uphold their right to be formally involved in negotiations in keeping with UN Security Council 1325, and that we will not support any peace agreement that does not protect their hard-won rights and freedoms. My Lords, my second point relates to our ally in the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, which has announced this week that 10 women's rights activists detained last year and reportedly tortured will be put on a trial for undermining the state's security. Our Foreign Secretary has hailed Britain's strategic partnership with Saudi Arabia. May I ask that my noble lady, the Baroness, urges the Foreign Secretary that he urges our strategic partner to release these women activists rather than put them through the show trial. My Lords, what does this say about a country when it fears journalists and women? And what it would say about us if we placed our strategic partnership with any country about such vital, non-negotiable principle of human rights? Finally, I welcome the government's commitment to hosting a review conference on preventing sexual violence in conflict initiative in November this year, and I would like to congratulate the noble Lord Ahmed for his personal leadership and commitment, and also welcome the news that Her Royal Highness the Countess of Wessex is to join and support the Preventing Sexual Violence initiative. I hope that the government will soon set out ambitious goals for that conference. As the noble lady will be aware, sexual and gender-based violence is endemic in situations of conflict, disaster and human displacement. Yet programs for countering these are routinely underfunded and insufficiently prioritised in humanitarian responses. I therefore renew my call on the UK government to commit to dedicating a fixed minimum proportion of international development budget to this purpose. I believe this would make a huge difference, particularly if other countries could be persuaded to do the same. My Lords, let me finish by expressing my respect for our female parliamentarians from all parties who have suffered vicious online abuse, including sexist and anti-Semitic hatred. I applaud their courage. We need to do more outspoken and principled women in public life.
Yeah.
Well, my Lords, how do you summarise that lot? I thought I'll group them. That's the way I'll do it today. But you can't group these speeches. They are too individual. And, of course, they reflect the individuals who've actually made them. And it's been a real privilege to sit here and listen to some of the really erudite and sometimes quite passionate subjects and things that people have said. Baroness Williams of Trafford started off talking about last year and the £5 million that was given for events. So I'd like to ask her, what about this year? Can the government find another £5 million down the back of the sofa, perhaps? I'm hoping that we may be able to do something like that again this year. And Baroness Gale talked about Wales being the best in the UK with the voting system in Wales, but of course it is not the first past the post system, which works against so many different minority groups in this country. And if it's the additional member system, and if we'd got fair votes, then we could have a more representative and wider democracy. But I'll leave that one. Yes.
Sorry, lady. But the fact is, most women in the Welsh Assembly got elected on first past the post system. So the PR system isn't magical to bring more women into politics.
Well, I'm grateful for that intervention, and I don't think it destroys the point I was making, but I do congratulate those women. My noble friend Baroness Hussein-Eche focused her comments very rightly, I'm sure, on BAME women, and particularly Muslim women, and made the very valid point that Muslim women aren't all victims. There are some hugely educated, talented women, and they can thrive and make a superb contribution and enrich our society. I particularly loved the comments of the Right Reverend Pellet, the Bishop of Portsmouth, talking about, we're not to talk about female bishops because they're all bishops, and it doesn't make any difference. They happen to be bishops who are women. So I'd already written female bishops down, and then I've quickly scrubbed it out again. Then he talked about it's not all as well about women doing what men do. We had a lot of people talking about, women in STEM, women doing men's occupations, but very, very rightly said, it's also about men doing what women do. And when we're all doing a similar kind of job, using our talents, which we undoubtedly have, that's when we will get a much fairer society. Baroness Anna St John talked about the Interparliamentary Union and the situation in Ethiopia. There still being hope, particularly with the actions of the brave Prime Minister, but still problems to deal with. But progress is being made, albeit slowly. That's always the way, though. Progress always seems to be slow. Baroness Jenkin talks about the 50-50 movement, Astor to stand, and the successes and the setbacks in the Conservative Party, despite the very hard work, and I pay tribute as well to the work of many Conservative women and the efforts that they have made in their own party. And there are, in the other parties, there are champions too, of course. Other champions are available. Baroness Donaghy talked about, we've run the right to work far harder than the men, and she's not the only one who's knackered, particularly me, after trying to accommodate all of the wise words that we've had. And the importance of gender equality impact assessments for all new legislation. And I'm sure the noble lady, the Minister, will want to maybe make a comment about that. Baroness Seacombe and Baroness Bull talked about how lucky we are to be who we are, where we are at the time that we are in. And talking about giving a hand up to our sisters elsewhere in the world who are not so fortunate. And Baroness Bull saying, we're lucky, yes, but we still face challenges at home and in the world. And like Baroness Hussein-Eche, she said, we are not what we wear. We do not need to be judged by whether we're wearing a scarf or whatever it is, whatever way that we're dressed. It's the way of the world, unfortunately. My noble friend Baroness Miller talked about the role of women in war and in peace,
and the fact that there is a direct ratio between women's involvement and the degree of danger and fear of particularly of nuclear attack, and the inspirational stories of the Greenham Common women all working together. Baroness Berridge talked about she's got a magic number, 228 women peer. I've got a magic number too. It's 167. So I was the 167th ever woman to be elected to the British Parliament. That really does put things into context, doesn't it? Baroness Armstrong of Hilltop talked about women who don't have settled status. Hugely important area. No recourse to public funds, and the help that abused women should all receive, regardless of what their status is. Baroness Mayo gave a very inspiring description of her brilliant mother, a Russian exile, facing tragedy, and she talked about how lucky we all are too. Lord Hussein, we talked about the plight of Kashmiri women, my colleague, and the harrowing picture of the half-widows, and the search for the missing men, mass rape. It's a terrible situation, and I really do commend the work that he does, as I do that of Lord Loomba. And he talked about the work of the Loomba Foundation and the importance of the priority for women all over the world. Baroness Hodgson of Abingdon, where are the women in the peace process? It's wrong to exclude 50% of us. We are the peaceful 50% of the process, and I realise now I've had 7 minutes. So there's so many other wonderful contributions, but I know that people have sat here a very, very long time today. I particularly enjoyed the contributions of Baroness Crawley, Lord Taylor of Warwick, Baroness Redfern, and Baroness Rock talking about the economic impact of women, and if we can only work together in order to create better chances that men don't, if men are allowed to write all the algorithms, then we certainly, get what we plan for, what they plan for, and we don't need that. And I just wanted to finish on, again, on the words of Baroness Williams on the theme of this year, which is balance for better and government planning for great things, including something I've campaigned on for a while on period poverty. And it occurred to me that we have a very special talent as women. We are very, very good at working together. And shame on us if we don't work together and make sure that we use our combined talents across parties, for no party, for all the parties, to make sure that we all work together in that particular way that is going to achieve the success that we, and of course our male counterparts as well. And I particularly loved Lord Crisp's contribution, well worth listening to. So let's get on with it. We can do this together.
Thank you. Yes, quite. I absolutely agree with the Noble Baroness. And I think it was great to start the debate with the excellent opening speech by the Noble Lady Baroness Williams, where she mentioned the things we needed to celebrate in the last year. You know, the Sex Disqualification Act, which allowed women to become barristers and solicitors and jurors and magistrates. Nancy Astor taking her seat, and indeed the Fawcett statue being opened in our Parliament Square, which was a wonderful event. And I'm sure that we can expect a stirring closure to this debate from the Noble Lady Baroness Vere, who I hope I can regard as a sister on this day. It has to be said that, particularly since I know that when the Noble Lady was a parliamentary candidate some years ago, she did surprise some of us by saying that she was a reluctant champion of women and that she didn't object to being called a Cameron cutie. Well, I have to tell you that I really objected to being called Blair's babe all those years ago. And said feminism doesn't resonate with her. Now, I like to think that since then, the Noble... And she did also say that she thought it was all a kind of bit of a left-wing agenda. Since then, I hope the Noble Lady has joined in your Lordship House the ranks of the feminists on her own benches who are so effective and who certainly do not concede the feminist ground to us lefties at all. And quite right. We've had a large range of inspiring speakers. And can I say thank you to the many organisations who sent briefings and the library for their brief. My noble friend Baroness Gale kicked us off on this side with covering a great deal of ground about celebration and indeed the challenges in her speech. And I think the noble Baroness Etchier was quite right to raise the stereotypes of Muslim women. I think her mum and mine were probably cut from the same cloth, though. And quite right to call out the casual racism against Muslim women. I think the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Portsmouth, gave us a most welcome address, and I absolutely agree with him about your bishops. You're all bishops. Of course you are. You're all vicars, of course you are. And of course we now welcomed one of them to our ranks too, very recently qualified. I can't mention everybody, but I do think there were some really great contributions from Baroness Meyer and Baroness Hodgson, Baroness Rock, Baroness Ainley and Baroness Jenkins, who is undoubtedly a leader, and I have been led by her from time to time on various issues, and I'm very happy to have done that. And I think it's quite likely that Baroness Miller and I were at Green and Common at the same time. I think it's very likely that we were both there. My noble friend Rita Donner, he was completely right, and I absolutely agree with her about the right to be knackered. I've just been in the chamber for about 6.5 hours today. And I think that the Baroness Beveridge was quite right to talk about discrimination of primogeniture. Although I have to say this is not an issue that's very high on the agenda, but I think it is sort of, as it were, from the top of discrimination. And my noble friend Baroness Armstrong, quite right to talk about access of support from the most vulnerable of our women, and indeed my noble friend Baroness Blackstone, and my noble friend Baroness Crawley, and my noble friend Lord Griffiths all made different sorts of contributions, like the part that the European Union has placed in promotion and protection of women's rights. And I think the noble Lord Griffiths can take back to his wife our thanks that she told him to put his name down on this. Whilst the noble Lady Baroness Jenkins was talking, I was reminded that I met and became a very close friend of a woman called Rosemary Pockley, who was the first time that I'd ever spoken to a woman in the Conservative Party who I would regard as a feminist and a sister, and who made me aware of the struggles that Conservative women have had and that they've had in their own party too. And they sometimes felt even worse than the ones that we were having in the Labour Party around the same sort of time. And I just wanted to pay tribute to Rosemary because she was a great friend and a great sister. I just want to talk a little bit now about the importance of our own body for equality, the EHRC, and the recent report based on the largest ever review into women's rights and gender equality in the UK. And as noble lords will know, the Commission is the regulatory body responsible for enforcing the Equality Act 2010. And we are accredited by the United Nations as an A-status national human rights institution. So the duties of the Commission to reduce inequality, eliminate discrimination and promote and protect human rights. Now, their biggest review on women's rights and gender equality threw up a whole range of issues, They do say quite clearly that important progress has been made in some areas. For example, forced marriage has been criminalised, shared parental leave has been introduced. However, there remain a range of areas that are significant and have significant challenges facing women and girls. And the evidence and recommendations have informed the UK's submission to the United Nations review of our progress on women's rights. And that review, of course, takes place across the world every 4 to 5 years. I gather that we are expected the United Nations is going to issue its recommendations to the UK government on Monday, the 11th of March. So I look forward to seeing what those are. However, the recommendations did include things that I think we all need to take that we need to be aware of. For instance, in the part on justice, just and fair conditions at work, pregnant women, new mothers and women of childbearing age are still routinely discriminated against in the workplace. And my colleagues on the front bench in the Commons, Dawn Butler and her team, have been highlighting this very vigorously for the last little while, but the research showed that 11% of mothers reported that they were either dismissed or made compulsory redundant, where others in their workplace were not, or treated so poorly that they felt they had to leave their job. What the EHRC are recommending that the UK government should do is introduce a mandatory duty on employers to take reasonable steps to protect workers from harassment and victimisation, ensure that flexible working is offered, make it mandatory for employers to publish the narrative that goes with, for example, the gender pay gap that they have within their company, and support employers in collecting the necessary data and closing pay gaps for ethnic minorities and disabled women. I hope the noble lady, the Minister, would support those recommendations from our own Commission. Turning to gender-based violence, despite signing the Istanbul Convention on the 8th of June 2012, the UK still has not yet achieved ratification and has indeed been criticised for lack of accountability and the oversight of violence against women and girls strategy. And so I wonder if the noble lady would like to tell us whether or not urgent steps are in place to ratify the Istanbul Convention, and once it's ratified, to dedicate sufficient resources to central, devolved and local authorities to ensure its effective implementation. The ERC recommends that the UK government should mitigate the impact of welfare reforms on lone parent families, the majority of whom are women, and by uprating the benefits, reversing the limit on child tax credits, and ensuring that work coaches are trained to deliver tailored employment support. And then finally, turning to the public sector equality duty, which underpins much of the work and was brought in during the 2010 Act. So does the Minister agree the Commission is proposing a new approach to the PSED to ensure that public bodies and government departments focus on the key inequalities affecting those affected by their functions? So to review and amend the specific duties underpinning the PSED to ensure public bodies are required to focus on those. So those are a very brief look. And a final thing, I think, is incorporating CEDAW into domestic law so that individuals can effectively challenge rights violations by using the domestic legal system and access a domestic remedy for alleged breach in CEDAW United Nations rights. My Lords, there are many other recommendations that they have, all of which seem to me, as they are domestic Commission for Equality and Human Rights, we need to be listening to very carefully. And I'll just finally say that I join with the noble Baroness Burt in her request for some money to have parties and events.
I'd like to thank all noble lords who have contributed today. It is indeed true. I regard myself as a champion of equality, reluctant because I'm actually rather irritated that we still need to be having these debates, and I truly wish that we did not have to. And certainly in the olden days, when I didn't like the word feminist because people used to tell me what to think, and I don't really like being told what to think. So I'm very, very happy to be a sister. But perhaps I won't quite put on the T-shirt. But we've heard some very powerful and moving messages from across the chamber today, and I can't emphasise enough how important it is that we continue to discuss and debate gender equality to ensure this issue gets the attention that it deserves. So same time next year, but just earlier in the day. I have to cover education, employment, women's leadership, particularly in public and civic life, discrimination, Brexit, the tragedy of violence against women and international considerations within 20 minutes. I haven't got a hope. So what I will do is, if I cannot do justice to the questions asked by the Noble Lords, I will of course write. And actually I'm very much looking forward to that question, that letter, because I think it will give me an opportunity to go into slightly more detail than I'm able to today. So turning first to employment and education, which of course is a thread that runs through everything. Women can only be empowered if they are educated and if they are gainfully employed, and such that they can have their own income. This was mentioned by so many Noble Lords today, and I suppose working from the top, I don't mean to address peerages first, actually. I was thinking more about the women on boards, and this issue has been around for many, many years now. And to be honest, I was going to quote all the figures, and, you know, yes, it is true, we have made progress on women on boards, but, my lords, it's not nearly enough. I mean, not nearly enough. I'm sort of slightly disappointed that these figures are not better than they should be. I recognise the restrictions of the pipeline and all of the other things that feed into our ability to get women on boards, but it is also the paucity of women in executive roles as well, which I find very disheartening. And I hope that in a few years' time we will come back to this and the numbers will show much better than they do now. The gender pay gap was covered by my noble friend, the Baroness Williams of Trafford, in her speech, so I won't go into it in great detail. But it is worth remembering that reporting is just the start for all of this. You know, we did say that we would start noting how companies are doing in terms of the gender pay gap, and it's crucial now that the employers use the gender pay gap data to identify the barriers to women's recruitment and progression. And they must take action to break down those barriers. Otherwise, what on earth is the point of reporting all of this data? So we have published evidence-based guidance on practical actions that employers can do to close the gap, alongside help to diagnose their gaps, to figure out why on earth their gaps are happening in the first place. Turning to the speeches by my noble friends Baroness Rock and also the noble lady Baroness Crawley, taking in the gamut of tech and AI, and wasn't that absolutely fascinating about algorithms written by men and how basically rubbish they are, because they only do one thing, and we need them to cover everybody. And there was some comment about, you know, what can the government do? Well, the government is doing many things in terms of making sure that the technology space becomes more diverse. We're supporting a scheme called the Tech Talent Charter, and it's a private sector initiative designed to promote diversity in the tech workforce. The signatories of the Charter pledge to implement recruitment and retention practices that will address the gender imbalance in those tech roles. But, my lords, it's got 290 companies signed up to it, from international tech giants right through to start-ups and from SMEs and charities. So all the government departments have agreed to sign the Charter, and DCMS was the first government department to sign up. So, my lords, this is one of the many tangible things that we can do to get more women interested in tech, and also to make sure that those women are there to sort out our algorithms for us, because clearly they won't sort themselves out. But also, I think another point to mention is that we are supporting female entrepreneurs. That is the most important. We have heard before that women often struggle to get loans from banks or equity from VC funds, and the government-backed startup loan system is providing funding and support to new entrepreneurs. 39% of loans go to women, so it's not quite 50, but it could be worse, I suppose. But that is £450 million, which I think is a fair amount of money, and I wish those women great success. But Baroness Redfern, my noble friend Baroness Redfern... Oh.
Grateful to the noble minister. Is she aware of the statistic that came out from the British Bankers Association that less than 1% of venture capital funding goes to women. And isn't that shameful, and shouldn't we do something about that?
Actually, I was not aware of that statistic. I knew it was low, but I really didn't realise it was that low. That is quite shocking. And actually, I think we certainly should look at that, but I think the British venture capital industry needs to give itself a long, hard look and figure it out for themselves, because they do have significant funds, and clearly women can make a great success with these companies. And I think I think we should all call upon them to actually look at that and make sure that that imbalance is sorted out. Returning to the speech by my noble friend Baroness Redfern, which she reminded us of some great female role models in the STEM sector. But also, if we're going to get the pipeline sorted out, we have to get the young girls interested in the first place, right early on, from primary school onwards. And it's very, very important that they start then, and then they get to school, then they get to college, they get to university, and they're still doing STEM subjects. So we announced substantial spending commitments in the autumn budget 2017 on maths, digital and technical education. And we are funding programmes to increase the take-up of maths, such as Advanced Maths Premium, computing and physics, and to support the better teaching of maths and science and computing in schools. But to address the gender imbalance in computing, for example, we are launching a computing pilot programme this year to improve girls' participation in computing as part of an £84 million investment to improve the teaching of computing in schools. My lords, this is essential for the AI thing that we talked about earlier. So I think these things all build up together and should lead to greater success for women and girls in this area. But I was taken by the point raised by the noble Lady Donaghy, who's moved place and had me a little shock then. But I will agree with the noble lady. Not everything is great. Women are almost 3 times more likely than men to be working part-time, which is associated with zero pay progression. Women are around 65% more likely than men to be earning the national living wage. My lords, I think we all want to change these things. And I think now that we know what we're aiming for, I hope that these figures will indeed improve. So how do we improve it? Well, my lords, as my noble friend Baroness Williams stated in her speech, the Government Equalities Office is working incredibly hard at the moment with, and this is across department, on the female economic empowerment strategy. My noble friend did outline exactly what this strategy is hoping to achieve, so I will not dwell on it too much at this stage. But I would like to point out, would like to talk about at this stage is the noble Lady Baroness Gale mentioned the Women's National Commission. And she is right. It was disbanded in 2010. My lords, we don't have any plans to replace it at this time. However, the government is very, very clear that the voice of women should be coming through, it should be better heard by policy. And that is not just on a committee somewhere, sitting in a room somewhere, it is across government. So the Government Equalities Office is actually doing a significant piece of work, it's a programme of work, to make sure that women's voices are better heard by policymakers. It's important that government really understands the issues that impact women from every walk of life and across every part of the government's agenda. Picking up very briefly, if I may, some issues mentioned by the noble Lord Crisp, where he focused on the status of workers, of nurses and carers on 0 hours contracts. Perhaps to focus on the latter of those, 0 hours contracts are something which causes a great amount of angst. It can be quite controversial. But we know that many people working on 0 hours contract, whether that be in the adult social care sector or elsewhere, they value the flexibility of 0 hours contracts. And for some, it's an attractive feature of one of those sorts of jobs. However, for others, we are well aware that fixed contracts, which with definite or hours, are preferable. My lords, there is an organisation called Skills for Care, which is funded by the Department of Health and Social Care, which is a workforce development organisation for the adult social care workforce. And they provide advice to employers on how to attract the best, how to attract and retain the most excellent staff, with the benefits of offering a choice of different employment contracts. And also finally, on employment and education, Baroness Mayer, my noble friend Baroness Mayer and Lady Finn mentioned sexual harassment in the workplace. And I'm sure there's probably not a female in this room that has not experienced something rather unpleasant happening to them at the workplace. And we take this issue extremely seriously. And we are committed to ending any harassment, bullying, intimidation and violence that women may face. The UK has some of the strongest workplace protections in the world, and they include explicit protection against sexual harassment in the workplace under the Equality Act 2010. And the government will consult this summer to explore whether these should be further strengthened. My Lords, if I may, I'd just like to turn now to international issues, because there was a significant amount of interest on international issues, and I want to make sure that I cover those issues where I can. My noble friend Baroness Hodgson started by talking about the Commission of the Status of Women and how the government can help it be more impactful. My Lords, this is the biggest annual international event on gender equality. It has produced some of the most impactful milestones in the history of women's empowerment, including the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Violence Against Women and the Beijing Platform for Action. We're looking forward to the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration next year. We will be working with like-minded countries to ensure CSW sets an ambitious programme of work for the next 5 years. My noble friend Lady Hodgson also mentioned support for human rights defenders, and the FCO and DFID strongly support this vital role played by these human rights defenders and civil society organisations in supporting sustainable development. For example, on International Human Rights Day in December, the Secretary of State for International Development spoke at an Amnesty International UK event to highlight the work of 5 inspiring female human rights defenders. The noble Lord Crisp mentioned the work of women in global health, and of course this is absolutely critical. And the government appreciates that without good health, then basically nothing else can possibly follow. So DFID supports developing countries to achieving the International Development Target 3.8 for universal health coverage. This means ensuring that everyone everywhere can access quality, essential health services for prevention and care without suffering financial hardship. Investment in health workers, the majority of whom are women, is essential to achieve this, and DFID invests in nursing and the broader health workforce through bilateral country programmes, multilateral partners and global initiatives such as the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB and malaria. And furthermore, on the subject of health, the noble Lady Baroness Blackstone made a very wide-ranging speech about sexual and reproductive health. And the UK leads the world in our long-term support for comprehensive sexual reproductive health and rights. We are the largest donor to the United Nations Population Fund and the second largest bilateral donor on family planning. In 2017, the UK committed to spend an average of £225 million per year over the next 5 years on family planning. Now, to illustrate what this means, we estimate that every year our investment will support nearly 20 million total users of contraception, it will prevent 6 million unintended pregnancies, and so prevent more than 3 million abortions, many of which would be unsafe. It will save the lives of over 6,000 women every year. My noble friend Baroness Ainley turned our attention to Ethiopia and also to FGM. And noble lords will know that the UK has long supported the end of FGM, both particularly with its support financially. The flagship programme that is in place currently comes to an end in 2019. But in 2018, we announced a further programme of a further £50 million of UK aid, which will be the single biggest investment worldwide to date by any international donor. And this will continue to tackle FGM across the most affected countries in Africa. We're currently at the early stages of competitive tendering, so we're not yet aware where the programme will cover. And of course, I can't prejudge the conclusion today, but I'm sure that the results of that tendering will be available very soon. My noble friends Baronesses Hellich and Hodgson spoke about preventing sexual violence in the Preventing Sexual and Violence in Conflict initiative. And this is absolutely critical thing, and it is a long-term thing that we must continue to pressure on, because we are committed to securing justice for survivors and breaking the culture of impunity by holding the perpetrators to account. The next PSVI conference will take place in November 2019. It is a 3-day survivor-centred event, and it will celebrate progress, address remaining challenges and secure further commitments. It's aiming to focus on accountability challenges, support for children born of rape, ensuring service provision for all survivors, and working with militaries, faith and the media. The Noble Lord Hussein mentioned Kashmir. And the UK government is concerned by any allegations of human rights violations and abuses. Our position is that any allegations must be investigated thoroughly, promptly and transparently. We have noted the concerns raised in the report by the UN Office of the High Commission for Human Rights in June 2018, and we continue to encourage all states, including India and Pakistan, to uphold human rights. The Noble Lady Baroness Hellich mentioned peace in Afghanistan, and of course we agree with her entirely. We continue to press for peace negotiations to be inclusive and representative of the Afghan society, including women's participation, and we also believe that any political settlement in Afghanistan should respect the rights of all Afghans, and that includes women. The role of women in peace was mentioned also by my noble friend Lady Hodgson and the Noble Baroness Lady Miller. The UK is strengthening partnerships with organisations that share our interest in building women's capacity to participate in mediation processes, including the UN, other multilaterals and women's mediation networks. But, my lords, the UK has a national action plan on women, peace and security, and it's jointly owned by the Ministry of Defence, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and DFID. And it sets out how the UK government will integrate a gender perspective into its work to build security and stability overseas, protect the human rights of women and girls, and promote their meaningful participation in conflict prevention and resolution. My lords, turning very briefly, I will certainly write to the Noble Lady Baroness Thornton on this. We obviously look forward to the report which will be coming from CEDAW. The UK was examined by the CEDAW Committee on the 26th of February in Geneva, and the CEDAW Committee will issue their concluding observations and recommendations later this month. And of course we will consider their recommendations fully. If I can provide any more information to the Noble Lady, I certainly will. And turning to violence against women and girls and domestic abuse, I believe that my noble friend opened with a very strong review of where we are, and if I can just put a few markers down from specific things. The Noble Lady Baroness Gale asked about the DA Commissioner and whether or not that person could be independent. My lords, they will provide public leadership on domestic abuse issues. They'll play a key role in overseeing provision of services in England. Their day-to-day independence from ministers will be particularly important when called upon to identify local areas whose service provision is insufficient. The Noble Lady Baroness Thornton asked about the Istanbul Convention and its ratification. I believe it is the case that if the Domestic Abuse Bill is passed, it will then ratify the Istanbul Convention. My lords, there was I have 30 seconds to cover public service and the recognition of great leaders, and Brexit's out the window. But we've had so many interesting speeches today on the representation of women. So many people in your Lordship's House have had despite not being elected ourselves, have been very, very involved in getting other people elected to the other place and into councils and elsewhere. And we are clear that politics must be representative. We've got to do whatever we can to make sure that we have a wide, the right sort of diversity. But, my lords, it is also the case that it is quite a rough and tough world out there at the moment. I don't know if any noble lord has seen the video of Amber Rudd reading out some of the abuse that she herself gets on Twitter. It is appalling and shocking, and we must fight back against those things. It is not normal people should not be speaking in that way, whether that be in person or anonymously. My Lords, sadly I must conclude. But the letter, I promise, will be a very good one. Once again, I'd like to thank all noble lords. It has been an excellent debate. This House works best when we work together, as noted by the noble Baroness Lady Burt. So let us do just that. Perhaps, as noted by Baroness Finn, we can structurally re-engineer our whole society, but I don't want to start a gender war, as noted by Baroness Mayer. So what must we do? We must march on. We know what needs to be done, and I'd like to move.
The question is this motion be agreed to. As many as other opinion will say content. The contrary not content. The contents have it.